Canto 2, Chapter 2, The Lord in the Heart. Sri Shuka said, by contemplating the Supreme Self of the universal form from which one generated, like Lord Brahma did, one, by thus finding satisfaction with the original person, regains the remembrance that was lost. With one's vision thus cleared, the intelligence then operates as before so that one can get one's life in order. One's spiritual adherence to the sounds of the impersonal absolute truth makes the intelligence, because of the many terms associated with it, ponder over incoherent ideas because of which one, without ever finding joy, wanders around in illusory realities, and the different desires belonging to them, as if one is dreaming. With the practical insight that he otherwise would be engaged in useless troublesome work, an intelligent attentive person fixed in his attention to achieve perfection in meditation, must therefore only minimally, not more than necessary, abide by imaginary non-spiritual purposes. What is the need for endeavoring for a bed when you can lie on the ground? Why would you strive for a pillow when you have your arms? Why should you endeavor for utensils if you can eat with your hands? And why would you worry about clothing when the trees are there with their bark? Are there no rags lying in the street? Is there no giving in charity? Do the trees not offer their alms maintaining others? Have the rivers dried up? Are the caves closed? Has the Almighty Lord given up on protecting the surrendered soul? Why would a learned man then have to speak to the liking of those who are led by wealth? When one thus with the matter of him, the most cherished, eternal, one super soul fully present in one's heart, is detached from the world, one must be of worship for him, the fortunate one, the permanent gain by which for certain the cause of one's material bondage is put to an end. Who else but the materialists would, with neglecting the transcendental thoughts, take to the non-permanent of material denominations because of which they, who constitute the general mass of the people that is controlled by the misery of the reactions of its fruitive labor, see themselves as fallen into the river of suffering. Whenever one desires to give up one's body, O King, one should as a sage, without being disturbed, comfortably seated and with one's thinking unperturbed by matters of time and place, in control of the life air restrain the senses with the help of the mind. Regulating the mind by the power of one's pure intelligence in relation to the original witness within, the knower of the field, one should merge with this self. That self should be confined to the fully satisfied supersoul, and thus putting an end to all activities, one will attain full bliss. Therein one will not find the supremacy of time that for sure controls the godly who direct the worldly creatures with their demigods, nor will one find their mundane goodness, passion or ignorance or any material change or causality of nature at large. Knowing what and what not relates to the divine of the transcendental position, they who wish to avoid what is godless, completely give up the perplexities of arguing to time and place thereto in purely at him directed goodwill every moment his worshipable lotus feet in their heart. The sage familiar with the science of properly regulating the force of the senses in service of the purpose of life, should retire in the following way. He must block his arse with his heel and direct the life air upward through the 6 primary places, navel, plexus, heart, throat, eyebrows and top of the skull, and thus overcome the state of material inertia. The meditator should, with the strength of his vision of wisdom, gradually direct the life breath from the navel to the plexus, the heart, and from there to the chest, from where he should bring it slowly into his throat and thus extinguish his material desires. The seer who is of detachment should, in order to attain the supreme, by blocking the 7 outlets, the ears, the eyes, the nostrils and the mouth, from between the eyebrows enter the domain of the head to remain there for a while, half an hour, for the sake of the ever-fresh eternality. If one, however, fosters a desire, O King, to lord over what one calls the realm of enjoyment of the gods in the sky, or wishes to rule the world of the gunas, the modes of nature, using the 8 mystic powers, one inevitably has to count with the mind and the senses associated therewith. One says that the great transcendentalists in the realm of the subtle body, because of their knowledge, austerity, yoga and absorption are able to move freely within and without the three worlds, while those who do their work based upon material motives never attain such progress. In the control of the divinity of fire Vasavanara, or with regular sacrifice and meditation, one attains by following the path of the Sushumna, the channel of balancing the breath, the illuminating pure spirit of the Absolute, whereupon being freed from impurities going upwards one, in respect of the cyclic order of the luminaries, reaches the galactic Kakra order of the Lord, O King, called Sisumara, meaning dolphin, to the form of the Milky Way, galactic time. Passing beyond that navel of the universe, the pivot, the center of spin of the maintainer, Vishnu, only the individual living being who got purified by the realization of his smallness, the yogi, reaches the place worshipped by those who know the Absolute Spirit. The self-realized souls enjoy their stay there for the time of a kalpa. Thereupon he who from the bed of Vishnu sees how the universe is burning to ashes because of the fire from his mouth, will leave that place for the supreme abode that lasts for 2 paradhas and is the home of the purified souls of elevation. There one will never find bereavement or old age, death, pain or anxieties, save that one sometimes has feelings of compassion when one sees the ignorant who are subjected to the hard to overcome misery of the repetition of birth and death. After surpassing the forms of water and fire and thus having reached that pure self free from fear, one thus having attained the effulgent atmosphere, in due course of time by the self its air reaches the ethereal self, the true greatness of one's soul. By sense having the smell, by the palate having the taste, by the eye having visions, by physical contact being in touch, and finally by sound vibrations experiencing the quality of the ether, the yogi by dint of the activity of the senses also attains the more subtle sphere. After he thus at the mental level in relation to the gross and subtle has reached a neutral point of I-awareness, he in the mode of goodness surpasses that realization of himself that is subject to change, the ego, and progresses, by stopping the operation of the natural modes, towards the reality of perfect wisdom. By that purification towards the self of the Supersoul, the person attains the peace, satisfaction and natural delight of being freed from all impurities. He who attains this destination of devotion certainly will never again get attracted to this material world, my dearest. The 2 direct and indirect paths I described to you, O protector of man, is as your majesty requested in proper accord with the Vedas. It is also in full agreement with the eternal truth, as formerly explained by Lord Vasudeva to Lord Brahma who had satisfied him in worship. For those who in this life wander around in the material universe, there is for sure no way of attaining more auspicious than the direct path by which one arrives at the devotional service, Bhakti Yoga, of the Supreme Personality Lord Vasudeva. The Great Personality, Vyasadeva, studied the Vedas 3 times in total and scrupulously, with scholarly attention examining them. He ascertained that someone is optimally focused when he is attracted to the soul. The Supreme Personality can be perceived in all living beings as the actual nature of that soul, as the Lord who by the intelligence of the seer is recognized by inference from different signs and effects. Therefore, every human soul, O King, must wherever he is and whenever he exists, hear about, glorify and remember the Lord as the Supreme Personality of the human being. They who fill their ears with venerations about the Supreme Lord most dear to the devotees and drink from that nectar, will find their, by material pleasure contaminated, state of mind purified and return to the presence of his lotus feet. Chapter 4, The Process of Creation. The bright ones who by simply dedicating themselves to his lotus feet completely give up all attachments to a present or future existence, realize without difficulty the progress of the heart and the soul towards a spiritual existence. Unto that renown all auspicious one my obeisances again and again. Chapter 6, The Hymn of the Original Person Confirmed. You should know that the material realm of all the living entities is but a portion of the energies of the person of happiness beyond the material coverings where there is no death or fear. while those who are attached to family life and who do not strictly follow the vow of celibacy have their place within the three material worlds. The threefold of that portion in the beyond constitutes the place where they reside who will never be reborn. With the entire cosmos situated in him, Narayana, the personality of Godhead, he who is self-sufficient in his transcendence, for the sake of creation, maintenance and destruction, has accepted the material illusion in the form of different most powerful manifestations. He, the primordial original personality, millennium after millennium creates within himself, by himself, his self, the universe, maintains himself for some time and absorbs himself again. Without a material tinge, pure and perfect in knowledge and all-pervading in his fullness, he is situated in truth as the Absolute without a beginning and an end, free from the qualities of nature, eternal and without an equal. O wise one, the great thinkers can only understand this with a pacified self and their senses at rest. Otherwise it will certainly be beyond their scope and be distorted by time-bound arguments. Chapter 7, Brief Description of the Past and Coming Avatars. The Absolute of the Spirit is known as unlimited happiness free from grief. It is the ultimate position of the Supreme Personality, the Fortunate One, in front of whom illusion flees away in shame. That pure uncontaminated state free from distinctions is beyond the words belonging to the material motive of fruitive actions. It constitutes the original principle of the Supersoul, is the cause of all causes and effect and the foundation for the, ever free from fear, peaceful awakening to the complete whole. In that state of full independence there is no need for the control and striving for perfection in restraint as practiced by the mystics, just as Indra, the provider of rain, does not have to dig a well. The Supreme Lord is the one master of all fortune because he brings the success of spiritual realization to all the good work that the living entity performed according to its natural disposition and material position. After the body is given up at the end of one's life, it dissolves in its constituent elements, but, like the ether that is never vanquished, the unborn spirit soul of the person is never lost either. Canto 3. Chapter 9, Brahma's Prayers for Creative Energy. To be sure of my support you must, as before, be of penance and prayer, meditate the mantras. By these qualities you will see all the worlds laid open within your heart, O Brahmin. When you connected in devotion are fully absorbed in the universe, you will see that I am spread throughout, O Brahma, and that you, including all the worlds and life forms, are part of me. You will see me situated within the universe and in all living entities like fire present inward, and that very instant you will undoubtedly be able to leave the weakness behind. As soon as you have approached me and, with your senses no longer under the control of the modes of nature, are free from the gross and subtle self, you will see your pure essence, Svarupa, and enjoy the kingdom of heaven. Chapter 25, The Glories of Devotional Service. Devahuti said, O my Lord, I am very disgusted with the prevalence of untruth of my agitated senses, because of which I fell into the darkness of ignorance. After so many births I, by your mercy, have now attained you who are my transcendental eye to overcome this so difficult to defeat darkness of not knowing. He who is the origin, the Supreme Lord of all beings and the Master of the universe has, with you, like the sun, risen to the eye that was blinded by the darkness of ignorance. You engaged me in this misconception of I and mine, a false ego, so now be pleased, my Lord, to dispel the delusion. With the desire to know about your material and personal aspect, Prakriti and Purusha, I offer you my obeisances who are the greatest of all the sages of the true nature. I have taken to the shelter of your feet because you are the person deserving it. You are for those who depend on you the axe that cuts the tree of an existence ruled by matter. The Supreme Lord said, I am of the opinion that the ultimate benefit for mankind consists of the discipline of yoga of relating to the soul, by which complete detachment from whatever pleasure and distress can be attained. The state of consciousness of the living being is held responsible for the bondage and liberation of the soul. In attraction to the three basic qualities or modes of nature, one is materially conditioned, but when one attaches to the soul of the universe, the original person, one is of liberation from the impurities of lust and greed and such that result from the misconception of I and mine. One is freed when the mind is pure in being equipoised, without distress and pleasure. It is in that state that the person, who is pure and transcendental to material nature, does not consider himself as being different but self-effulgent, sees himself as simultaneously complete and small. With a mind full of spiritual knowledge, renunciation and connectedness in devotion, one is indifferent about one's material existence, that is then less of influence. There is no yogic path as auspicious for the perfection of the spirit as the performance of devotional service for the Supreme Lord, the complete of the soul. Any man of knowledge knows that strong attachment constitutes the entanglement of the soul, but that for devotees that same attachment opens the door to liberation. Being tolerant, compassionate, friendly to all living beings and inimical to no one, being peaceful and abiding by the scriptures, the sadhu, the man of virtue, of holiness, a seer, is adorned with sublime qualities. They who are persistent in performing devotional service unto me, refrain staunch for my sake from acting in desire and give up on family ties and friendships. Delighted to listen to the stories about me, they fix their minds upon me and chant my names, without causing distress with their various penances. Someone who in devotional service got detached from sensual pleasures, will, on the path of yoga, uniting his consciousness, constantly thinking about everything that I arranged, in this world that is seen, and the next world that is heard about, be engaged in the endeavor of controlling his mind the proper way. By not being the servant of the basic qualities of nature, by developing spiritual knowledge on the basis of renunciation, by fixing oneself on me in yoga and by serving me with devotion, a person in this very life reaches me, the true self within all souls. The fortunate one said, "It is better to be of service to the Lord than egocentric to strive for fame and perfection." It is the natural inclination of the undivided mind to serve according to the scriptures that what is purely good and true, and of the senses in their detection of sense objects to be of service as gods. Because they do not desire my opulence or the eightfold mastery over the material illusion, nor follow a desire for the splendor of my supreme divinity, those devotees in this life enjoy the blissful state of my transcendence. Thus wandering through both this world and the world of the more subtle experiences, they, who in relation to my embodiment in this world have given up on the desire for wealth, cattle, houses and everything else, unflinching in their devotion worship me, the all-pervading Lord of liberation, for I take them to the other side of birth and death. No other person or anything else but me, the Supreme Lord and original ruler over matter and the person, the soul of all souls, can put an end to the terrible fear of birth and death. Out of fear of me the wind blows and the sun shines, out of fear of me Indra showers rain and fire burns, and out of fear of me death is all around. Absorbed in spiritual knowledge and renunciation, yogis free from fear, for the ultimate benefit in Bhakti Yoga take shelter of my feet. The only way for people to find in this world the ultimate perfection of life is to steadily focus their mind in an intensive practice of devotional service to me. Chapter 26, Fundamental Principles of Material Nature. The Supreme Lord said, I shall now describe to you the different categories of reality, knowing which anyone can be released from the yoke of the modes of material nature. I shall explain that to you about which one speaks as the spiritual knowledge that cuts the knots of egoism in the heart and constitutes the ultimate purpose of one's self-realization. The Supreme Soul, the original person elevated above matter, is beginningless and free from the basic qualities of nature. He constitutes the inner self-effulgent refuge of the entire creation he maintains. That very person, the greatest of the great, accepted out of his own free will for his pastime the divine, subtle material energy characterized by the three modes. By these modes nature created the variegated forms of the living entities. The living beings seeing them were, from the first day on in this world, illusioned by them because these forms constitute the covering of their spiritual knowledge. Because the living entity identifies himself with the operation of material nature, he attributes the activities performed by those basic qualities to himself. Thus, being bound to a conditioned life, the naturally joyful, independent witness who does not do anything, became dependent. Knowers of truth state that the body and the senses one is engaged with are subject to the operation of the basic qualities of material nature, and that the spirit soul, above all matter, is responsible for the experience of happiness and distress therewith. From the cosmic intelligence of the Mahat Tattva, that undergoes the changes caused by the Supreme Lord's energies, the in five divided elements, the material ego, or I-awareness, and the therefrom generated mind in combination with the different senses of action and perception originated. Moved by that active potency of the Lord, the ego manifested itself in the three forms of goodness, passion and ignorance. The false ego, the materially identified self, can thus, according to the three gunas, be characterized as being the one acting, the instrument that is handled, the body, as also the effect of the actions, or that what was realized. One may in that context also speak of the ego as being serene, active or dull. With the transformation of the ego in three forms, from its emotions in goodness, the principle of mind evolved that with its thoughts and reflections gives rise to desires. Chapter 27, Liberation from Falsehood. The Supreme Lord, as Kapila said, even though the living entity abides in a material body, he is not affected by the basic qualities of matter when he does not claim proprietorship, and thus is not subject to change, just like the sun that is not affected by being reflected in water. But when this very living entity is absorbed in false ego and thus is possessed by the modes of material nature, the individual soul is bewildered and thinks, "I am the doer." Because of the faulty actions resulting from dealing with material nature in such a way, he thus, in discontent, helplessly undergoes the repeated occurrence of birth and death in births from different wombs or species, depending the good or bad life he led or a combination of these. Like having landed in a nightmare wherein the things happening do not really exist, there is for the living entity, who only contemplates what occurs to his senses, no end to his materially conditioned existence of illusion. Therefore, the mind of attachment to material pleasure must consequently, free from attachment, gradually be brought under control on the path of Bhakti Yoga. Beginning with the great vow of yoga of non-violence, truth, non-stealing, celibacy and non-possessiveness in the discipline of detachment, one should practice the different forms of yoga and develop, endowed with faith, unalloyed devotion unto me by listening to my stories. Therein one must be without enmity and regard all living beings as equal, not entertain intimate relations and be celibate, be free from chatter and offer the results of one's labor. One should be satisfied with whatever comes of its own, eat little and live thoughtfully in a secluded place and be peaceful, kind, compassionate and self-realized. In relating to others and to one's body, one should not follow the physical concept of life but rather, from the spiritual perspective, attend to the factual truth of both the material and the personal aspect. One should transcend the stages of consciousness, of waking, dreaming and deep sleep, and stay away from other conceptions of life. Thus, with a purified intellect, the true self, the soul of one's realization within, should be seen as clear as the sun before one's eyes outside. One should arrive at the realization of the transcendental support of the material cause, the Supreme Soul, that is manifest as a reflection within the untrue, that is there as an eye for the illusory nature of matter that penetrates everything as one without a second. It is like with the sun that can be seen as a reflection on water or on a wall, but factually is situated in the sky. The truth of the seer is thus revealed as a reflection of the absolute in the threefold nature of the materially identified ego that consists of body, senses and mind. Someone who in this material world falsely unites with the material elements, the objects of enjoyment, the material senses, the mind, intelligence and so on, is situated in sleep. But once he is awakened in the devotion of yoga, he is freed from false ego. Even though not being lost, still someone who spiritually awakened, at first unjustly considers himself lost because he, just like someone upset because of losing his fortune, as the silent witness realizes the demise of his false ego. Coming to understand this, such a person, knowing the situation that he accepted under the reign of the false ego, realizes the mercy of the original position of his true self, his original individuality, Svarupa. Devahuti said, "Dear Brahmin, is it not so that material nature never releases the soul because the two are eternally attracted to each other, O best one? Just as aroma and earth have no separate existence and taste does not exist apart from water, intelligence cannot exist independent of consciousness. Then how can a soul be free from material nature? Is the soul, being a passive observer, not forced to act because of the basic qualities of matter? The great fear one may avoid by contemplating the fundamental principles will not cease because every time its cause appears again. The Supreme Lord said, one will realize the freedom when one, with a pure mind serious unto me and faithfully listening to my stories in devotional service, manages to perform one's duties without desiring the fruits thereof. By means of spiritual knowledge, with a vision of the absolute truth, in yoga strongly connected in penance, detached and firmly fixed, someone becomes absorbed in the soul. Bound to its material nature, a living entity is day after day consumed, like firewood by fire, disappearing gradually. But with the damage experienced in his dependency, understanding the wrong of the desire to always enjoy, he, with his thus forsaking sensual pleasures, firmly stands in his own glory. The many inauspicious matters a person may dream of in his sleep, will not in the least daunt him when he is awakened. Someone, who has fixed his mind upon me, the knower of the absolute truth always contented within, thus has nothing to fear from material nature. When someone wise thus for many years and many births is engaged in self-realization, he will develop a distaste for enjoying whatever, up to the heaven of the Creator, Brahma Loka. Someone devoted to me who under my protection for the sake of awakening his intelligence, by my unlimited mercy goes for the ultimate goal of his existence that is called Kaivalya, enlightenment, emancipation, beatitude, will in this life soon attain a steady self-awareness and be free from doubt. The yogi who departed for that heavenly abode will, after leaving behind both the subtle and the gross body, never return. When the attention of the perfected yogi is not drawn towards yogic powers to control the material illusion, my dear mother, then, having no other purpose in his life, his progress towards me will be unbounded, because the power of death is lost therein. Chapter 28, Kapla's Instructions on the Execution of Devotional Service. The Supreme Lord said, O royal daughter, I will now describe the characteristics of the yoga system, the object of which is to restrain the mind by following the regulative principles so that one filled with joy may tread the path of the absolute truth. One must perform one's duties to the best of one's ability and avoid everything contrary to this. One should be satisfied with whatever is achieved by the grace of the Lord and worship the feet of a self-realized soul, a spiritual master. One should desist from civil materialistic practices and take pleasure in duties leading to liberation. One must also eat little and pure vegetarian food, always live in seclusion and be a servant of peace. Non-violent, truthful, free from unrighteous acquisition and not possessing more than one needs, one should, in celibacy, austerity and cleanliness, studying the Vedas, exercise respect for the appearance of the original personality. Observing silence and acquiring steadiness in control of yoga postures and one's breath, one should gradually withdraw from the objects of the senses and direct one's mind to the heart. One finds oneself absorbed, or in samadhi, when one either fixes one's mind and prana on one of the 6 chakras, or when one focuses one's mind on the pastimes of the Lord of Vaikuntha. With these and other methods of yoga attentively engaging one's intelligence and controlling one's breathing, the mind, which is contaminated by material enjoyment, must be gradually subdued. In control of the yoga asanas, one should do this by preparing a seat in a sanctified spot and sit there straight up in a comfortable posture. For the mind to become steady and free from distractions, one should clear the passage of the life breath or prana by inhaling, holding one's breath and exhaling again, or the other way around. The mind of the yogi who is of such a self-control is soon free from disturbances, just like gold that, put in fire and fanned with air, is quickly freed from contaminations. By means of breath control one eradicates contaminations. By turning inward material association recedes, by focusing the mind sin is overcome, and by meditation one rises above the power of the modes of nature. Because of the pure love one thus through devotion has developed towards Hari, the Supreme Lord, one's heart melts, and therefrom one constantly experiences that one's hairs stand on end out of extreme joy, and that there is a flow of tears out of intense love. In that state the mind, like a fish on a hook, gradually gives up. The moment the mind is situated in the liberated position, it immediately turns indifferent and dies away with one's detachment from the sense objects. The person of such a mind at that time, just like a flame, is no longer separated from the big fire of the Supersoul, and experiences oneness in freedom from the interaction of the operating modes of nature. When he is situated in his ultimate glory because of the cessation of the mind that responds to material impulses, he on top of that, in his position of transcendence above happiness and distress, sees that indeed the cause of pleasure and pain is found in the ignorance of falsely identifying oneself in ego. In that ego he attributed to himself that what now is realized by the form and measure of time of the Supersoul, the localized aspect of the Lord. As for the body the perfected soul has, because he achieved his predestined real identity, Svarupa, no notion of not continuing physically, or that he would remain or again take birth. Just as it is with someone who blinded by intoxication fails to realize whether he has any clothes on or not. Thus, one is faced with the activities one undertook with one's body that by divine ordinance will continue for as long as it takes. One is then, because of one's yoga, situated in self-absorption, the state of consciousness in which he, who awakened to his constitutional position, no longer gives priority to or worships the body with its sensuality and byproducts that was born like in a dream. The way a mortal man is understood as being different from his son and wealth, irrespective his natural inclination for them, so too a person in his original nature differs from his body, senses, mind and such, irrespective his identification with them. It is like with a fire that differs from its flames, sparks and smoke, although they by nature, being produced by itself, were intimately associated with it. The elements, the senses, the mind and the primary nature of the individual soul, the same way differs from the seer, who is the Supreme Lord, who is known as the spiritual complete. The way one with an equal mind sees all creatures as being part of the same natural order, one should also see the soul as being present in all manifestations and all manifestations in the soul. Just like the one fire manifests itself in different types of wood, so too the one spiritual soul, in its position in material nature, knows different births under different natural conditions. When one thus has conquered one's own, difficult to comprehend, bewildering, divine material energy, that is both cause and effect, one is situated in the position of self-realization, in one's Svarupa. Chapter 29, Explanation of Devotional Service by Lord Kapila. In case of an uninterrupted flow of thoughts in the direction of me who is present in everyone's heart, just like the water of the Ganges that continuously flows towards the ocean, and when one wishes to hear about my qualities only without losing oneself in ulterior motives, one may speak of an exhibition of pure devotional service, of bhakti unto the Supreme Person. When one by means of this bhakti yoga, which one calls the highest platform, succeeds in dealing with the three modes of nature the way I explained it, one attains my transcendental nature. When one performs one's duties without attachment to the results, one is stronger in one's yoga, and when one, without unnecessary violence, without eating meat for example, is regular in the performance of one's yoga exercises, one will find happiness. Being in touch with the ritual of seeing, offering respect, doing mantras and being of a positive approach with my benevolence and abode, and thinking of me as being present in all living beings, one is of detachment by the mode of goodness. By means of sense control and proper regulation, being of the greatest respect for the great souls, being compassionate with the poor, and by being friendly in association with like-minded souls, by hearing about spiritual matters, chanting my holy names, being straightforward, by association with civilized people and not entertaining false ego. The consciousness of a person who with these qualities is dutiful towards me is completely purified. No doubt he by simply hearing about my excellence will directly reach me. The way the sense of smell catches the aroma that is carried from its source by means of the air, similarly consciousness by means of yoga catches the Supreme Soul who is free from change. A mortal human of worship for the deity but with no respect for me who, in the form of the Super Soul, is always situated in every living being, is nothing but a hanger-on. Someone who in worship of the deity has no regard for me as the Supreme Ruler and Super Soul present in all beings, is in his ignorance only offering oblations into the ashes. He who offers me his respects but is envious when others are present, lives in his campaigning against others with his opposing view in enmity and will never find peace of mind. O sinless one, I am certainly not pleased when they who manage to worship me in my deity form with all paraphernalia, and not of respect for other living beings. One has to worship the idol of me, the Lord, and such, for as long as one is of profit-minded labor, is building up karma, and not of the realization that I reside in one's own heart and in the heart of others. In the form of death I shall create fear in those who discriminate with regard to the body of themselves and that of others who discriminate according to race and sex. One should therefore, with charity, respect and in friendship regarding everyone as an equal, propitiate me, the one true self abiding in all. Among human beings a society with 4 classes is the better one, and of those classes the Brahmins are developed the best. Among the Brahmins the better one is he who knows the Vedas, and of those the one who knows its purpose is even better. The one who puts an end to all doubts is better than he who knows what the purpose of the Vedas is, and the Brahmin among them who performs his duty is better than him. He who is free from worldly attachment is still better, and the one who performs his righteous duty not for himself alone is the best developed of them all. Therefore, I know of no greater being than a person who with a dedicated mind has offered all his actions, wealth and life without any reservation to me, and with persistence is of service without any other interest. Such a one who regards the Supreme Lord, the controller of the individual soul, as having entered all the living beings by his expansion in the form of the Super Soul, the Paramatma, is therefore mindfully of respect for his fellow creatures. O daughter of Manu, someone can attain the original person by following either of these 2 paths of bhakti and mystic yoga separately that I have described. This original form of the Supreme Lord of Brahman, the Supreme Spirit, and Paramatma, the personalized local aspect, is the transcendental, ethereal personality of the primal reality, the most important person, all of whose activities are spiritual. Natural time, known as the divine cause of the different manifestations of the living entities, constitutes the reason why all living beings who consider themselves as existing in separation from the greatest live in fear. He who from within enters all the living entities, constitutes the support of everyone and annihilates them again by means of other living beings, is named Vishnu, the enjoyer of all sacrifices, who is the time factor, the master of all masters. There is no one specially favored by him, nobody is his friend or enemy. He cares for those who are attentive, and of those who are inattentive he is the destroyer. Canto 4. Chapter 20, Lord Vishnu's appearance in the sacrificial arena of Prithwa Maharaja. Therefore he who is well acquainted and knows that one knows this body to one's ignorance, desires and karma, will never become the slave of it. In other words, which person having life experience would in his detachment call himself the proprietor of the wealth, house and children that result from such a bodily concept? The one pure self that is enlightened and free from material characteristics, constitutes the reservoir of all good qualities that, transcendental to the body and the mind and pervading all, is the undivided witness unrelated to the material world. Anyone who thus knows about the soul that exists within this body is, despite being situated within material nature, as a person never affected by the basic qualities of nature. Such a one is situated in me. He who free from ulterior motives, always doing his duty, worships me with faith and devotion will, O King, discover that his mind step by step finds the highest satisfaction. Free from the modes, the basic qualities, of nature and with an equal vision, he who, innerly free from contaminations, is of peace, will achieve the equipoise of my spirit of emancipation. Any person who knows this changeless soul, as simply being the indifferent superintendent of the physical elements, the knowing and working senses and the mind, will find all fortune. They who are bound to me in friendship and enlightenment will never become disturbed by the happiness or distress they see associated with the different basic qualities and the constant change of the material body consisting of the physical elements, the active senses, its intentions and the mind. Equipoised in happiness and distress, equal to all who are more elevated, lower or situated in between and with the senses and mind controlled, be as such the protector of all citizens, O hero, together with the others arranged by me. Chapter 21, Instructions by Prithwa Maharaja. Persons of penance destroy, because of their inclination to serve the lotus feet, immediately the dirt that accumulated in their minds in countless births. Just like the Ganges water that emanating from his toes vanquishes all dirt, they, day after day, see their purity increasing. By particularly time and again gathering strength in seeking, in a systematic scientific way, refuge at his lotus feet, the person disgusted with the endless ruminations will purify himself and not again surrender to a materially motivated life full of hindrances. He who is present in this world with his various qualities and transcendence is worshipped with different kinds of sacrifices. In these sacrifices, performed with physical means and the practicing of mantras, his forms and names, as a condensation of his nature, then serve the purpose of the science of being free from contaminations. Just like fire manifests differently depending the shape and quality of the firewood, the Almighty One also manifests this body of forms and names by activities and inner consciousness that are the result of a certain combination of the non-manifest primary nature, the time, the mental disposition and the dutifulness. Chapter 22, Prithwa Maharaja's meeting with the four Kumaras. I welcome you, O best of the twice-born, you who move around like children and controlled by vows with a great faith are motivated for liberation. O masters, can persons who, having fallen into this material existence, are stricken with the illness of living to the command of their senses, all by themselves find any good fortune? There is no need to ask you about your well-being, for you supreme souls have no mind concerned with matters of good or bad fortune. I therefore am certain that you, for us who suffer the pains of a material existence, are the friend to ask how one soon in this world may find salvation. Manifesting as the supreme goal in life of the Transcendentalists, the Supreme Lord, the Unborn One in the form of the Perfected Ones, moves about on this earth in order to show his devotees his mercy. O King, you are evidently attached to the organized appreciation for the qualities of the Lord, his lotus feet. Difficult as it is, that will free the indwelling soul, given a steady practice, from the dirt of the emotions of lust. In the scriptures is defended that only the absence of attachment to other matters than the soul, in combination with an intense attachment for that true self which is transcendental to the modes of nature, constitutes the perfect conviction for the salvation of man. That is realized when one is a dutiful devotee with faith and devotion, by means of discussion and inquiry is spiritually united in one's determination, and with respect for the Lord of Yoga regularly attends and listens to the stories of the God-fearing ones. Reluctant to associate with the rich and the ones who are after sense gratification and not after the acquiring of goods as approved by them, one gets rid of the bad taste of the happiness that goes without drinking the nectar of the qualities of the self of the Supreme Personality. With non-violence as a vegetarian, following in the footsteps of the teachers of example, by remembering the Lord of Liberation, by testifying of his activities, by the nectar of following according to the yoga principles without a material motive, and by practicing in line with the precepts, one thus being without offenses, will be living a simple life with tolerance for the worldly dualities. Within one's ear constantly the discussions in relation to the transcendental qualities of the Lord, it may be so that one, increasing in one's devotion and consciousness, is of an uncontaminated existence in the material world that is opposed to spiritual understanding, for when one has realized that kind of listening, it is easy to be attached to the spirit of transcendence. When the person in respect of the teacher of example is fixed in attachment to the spiritual supreme, the impotence of the heart, as characterized by the 5 hindrances, ignorance, egoism, attachment, dislike and death, fear, that is situated within the covering of the individual soul that consists of the 5 elements, will be burned by the force of detachment and spiritual knowledge like fuel being burned by fire. With that immolation of the inner weakness being freed from all the associated material qualities, there is no difference, as there was in the past, between the interaction with the supersoul and the outer action of the self. For such a one, that difference has ended just like a dream ends when one wakes up. The person sees of himself both the objects of his senses and his transcendence as the witness. In that position he knows desires and designations, but without the two, not being innerly divided, that is not the case. The only reason that one sees differences between oneself and something or someone else is that there are different causes for each position everywhere, just like one has with their reflection that is different in water and another medium like a mirror. Because the mind is agitated by the senses that are drawn towards the sense objects, the pure consciousness of one's intelligence is easily lost, just like a lake that is overgrown with plants. Scholars of the soul state that in the destructive choking of one's remembrance the constant mindfulness of one's consciousness is destroyed, and that the soul bereft of real knowledge thus degrades. In this world there is nothing as bad as the obstruction of that self-interest, in which other matters seem to be so much more interesting than the realization of one's own self that one hinders. When one constantly thinks for the sake of riches and sensual pleasures, all the virtues of human society are destroyed. Therefrom, bereft of knowledge and devotional service, one lapses into the inertia of matter. They who want to cross over the ocean quickly should never cling to the slowness of matter, for that is the great stumbling block for the virtues of religiousness, economic development, regulation of pleasures and salvation. In this respect, liberation is likely to be there as the most important one, because engaged in the interest of the other 3 paths one regularly finds oneself caught in the finality of things and in fear. For all those notions of a higher or lower form of life there will never be any peace, for they, depending upon the interaction of the material modes, are by the ordinance of the Lord in the form of time all destroyed. O best of kings, be therefore just as I am persuaded of him, the Supreme Lord, who from within the heart everywhere manifests by dominating as the master of the field, radiating into every hair follicle, and who for all the moving or non-moving living beings covered by a body endowed with senses and a life breath, is there for the consideration of self-realization. Surrender yourself unto him, the root cause manifesting as the truth within the untruth. By this deliberate consideration one is freed from the illusions of an intelligence that wonders whether one deals with a rope or a snake. Thus, one is situated in the eternal liberation of the uncontaminated, pure truth of the original nature, transcendental to all the impurities of one's karmic fruitive activities. Be unto him, Vasudeva, of devotion like the devotees who find him, whose lotus toes bring them joy, worthy to take shelter of. By devotional service the hard knot of karmic desire is uprooted, but that is never so with people missing that respect, however hard they try to stop the waves of sense enjoyment. In this material ocean the hardship of the non-devotees is great with the sharks of the six senses. They cannot cross the ocean without much difficulties, and therefore you should make the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead your boat for passing that unconquerable expanse. Chapter 23, Prithwa Maharaja returns back home. At first, he saw now and then at bulbs, roots, fruits and dry leaves, then he drank only water for several fortnights, and finally he only breathed the air. Like the great sages the hero tolerated during the sum of the 5 fires, of the sun above and 4 fires in the 4 directions, in autumn the torrents of rain, in winter to be up to his neck submerged in water while he all year long slept on the bare earth. Simply longing for Krishna, he tolerated it to be without words, sensuality, the discharge of semen and freedom of his life breath, and was thus of all possible practices of the best austerity. Unrelenting keeping to the perfection of Krishna, he thus gradually got rid of all the dirt and desires of his workload, his karma, while he by means of breath control fully stopping his mind and senses broke with all that bound him. And so, he, the best of all human beings, worshipped the Supreme Personality of Godhead with the very yoga the fortunate Sanat Kumara spoke about concerning the ultimate goal of relating to the soul. With him as a devotee endeavoring with faith on the path of devotional service unto the Fortunate One, the Lord, who is the origin of the Spirit of the Absolute, became his exclusive object of worship. He, who was perfectly alert in the constant remembrance of a purely transcendental mind, found by these devotional activities unto the Supreme Lord the perfection of wisdom. Thus, not attached to whatever one could call one's own, he became free from doubt and the material conception of life that covers the soul. Free from desire and firmly convinced of the ultimate goal of the soul, he had given up on all other notions of life and transcendental knowledge, for he realized that as long as a practitioner of the yoga system in his renunciation is not attracted to the stories about the elder brother of Gada, Krishna, he would not be free from illusion. He, the best of the heroes, fixing his mind on the super soul, in due course of time thus thoroughly being spiritually purified, gave up his vehicle of time. By blocking his anus with his ankle, he pushed up his life air gradually from the navel to the heart and from there upwards to the throat to fix himself between the eyebrows. This way gradually establishing his life breath in his head, he, being freed from all material desires, merged his life breath with the complete of the cosmic breath, his body with the complete of the earth and his innerly fire with the fire of the complete of the universe. After merging the different apertures of his body, of his senses, with the sky and his fluids with the waters, he merged the earth with water, water with fire, fire with air and air with sky, and thus united everything divided with its proper source. He united the mind with the senses and the sense organs with their objects, and then merged the sense objects with the 5 elements they had originated from. Next, he returned the material ego to the Mahat Tattva, the totality of the material energy. On his path towards him, the reservoir of all qualities, he placed his individuality and the lives belonging to it in the reservoir of all potencies. He, the living entity and enjoyer, as the master at the senses, thus returned home, back to his constitutional position, by dint of his insight in the spiritual knowledge of self-realization and renunciation. Among all those who but for a short moment live here in this human world, there is, for the ones who on the path of liberation do their best for the kingdom of God, nothing too difficult to achieve. He who, having achieved the human form of life, on the path of liberation gets involved in the great difficulties of all that one does for one's sense gratification in this world, is, in going against his own true self, no doubt cheated by illusions. Chapter 24, the song sung by Lord Shiva. In particular, this what I am going to tell you now, is what you always should attend to and repeat for yourselves, for it is very pure, auspicious, transcendental and beneficial. Sri Rudra said, in worship of Vasudeva, all glories unto you, the best of all self-realized souls who brings happiness for the welfare of all. Let there be my obeisances unto you, for you are the all-perfect and worshipable soul of all, the super soul. All my respects unto you Vasudeva, from whose navel the lotus sprouted. You are the source of the senses and the sense objects and the immutable self-illumined state that is of an eternal peace. I offer my obeisances also to you in the form of Sankarsana, the Lord of Ego and Integration, who as the origin of the subtle non-manifest matter is the unsurpassable master of disintegration at the end of time, and to the master of all development, the soul in the beyond Pradama, the master of intelligence. All glories to you. I offer my respects again unto you as Anuruddha, Lord of the Mind, of whom the Sun God is an expansion, the Master and Director at the senses. My obeisances unto the Supreme One of perfect purity and completeness, who stands apart from this material creation. Unto you as the heavenly abode, the path of liberation, the gateway of the eternal and the purest of the pure, my obeisances. All my respects I offer unto you, the golden seamen, who are the continuity of the Vedic sacrifices. Be praised, O you who invigorate the ancestors and the gods, O Master at the three Vedas and the sacrifices. You are the leading deity of the moon who pleases everyone. All my respects unto you, the super soul pervading all living beings. The strength and power of all that exists, the body and transcendental self of the diversity of the material world, and the maintainer of the three worlds, I offer my obeisances. All glories to you who, as the ether, reveal the meaning, you, the within and without of the self, the supreme effulgence. My obeisances unto you as the beyond of death and the purpose of all pious activities. Unto the inclining as also disinclining God of the forefathers, unto you as the final outcome of all fruitive action and as death itself, you, the cause of all sorts of misery resulting from irreligion, I offer my respects. Because you are the topmost bestower of benedictions, the mastermind of all mantras, the causal self, I offer you my respects. All glory to you as the greatest of all religiosity, unto you, Krishna, who are the perfection of intelligence. You are the oldest of the old, the original personality and master of yogic analysis. The reservoir of the three energies, of the doer, the sense activities and the resultant workload, the reason of the material identification of the soul, the egotism, named Rudra and the embodiment of knowledge, intention and the voice of all powers, I offer my obeisances. They who, performing their occupational duties, wish to purify themselves and live without fear, must meditate on this form of yours in a devotional practice of yoga, bhakti yoga. Your grace is easily obtained by the devotees, but for all other embodied souls you are difficult to reach, even for those belonging to the King of Heaven Indra or for the self-realized souls whose ultimate goal it is to attain oneness with you. What else would one desire but your lotus feet, once won by pure devotional service, has been of the worship that even for the most virtuous is difficult to attain. The invincible time, by which you in your prowess and majesty with simply raising your eyebrows vanquish the entire universe, constitutes no threat to a soul of complete surrender. Even but for a moment enjoying the association of a company of devotees cannot compare with heaven or with merging, not to mention worldly blessings. Let therefore us who, in order to wash away the ruminations of sin, dip in and step out of the Ganges, be the mercy and virtue of this association. For this association with the glorification of your feet defeats all misfortune and blesses the normal living beings with the fullest goodness. He whose heart was purified by the blessing derived from entering that association of Bhakti Yoga, will be very happy to find therein the wisdom of your way and will never end up bewildered in the dark pit of worldly influences. You are the Absolute Spirit, the transcendental light spread everywhere like the ether, in whom this universe of the cosmic manifestation has appeared. You are the one who by his energy has created, maintains and again annihilates this variegated manifestation. That eternal, unchanging intelligence of an increasing complexity is, so I understand, likely to give trouble to the individual soul in relation to you as the essential independent self, O Supreme Lord. Experts in the field of the Vedas and their corollaries are those transcendentalists who, for their perfection, with faith and conviction duly, by a wide range of organized actions, glorify you who are identified by that what is created, by the senses and by the heart. You are the one original person from whose dormant energy the diversity of the totality of the material energy has originated, that is ruled by the natural modes of passion, goodness and ignorance. It is a diversity we know as the ego, the sky, the air, the fire, the water and the earth, the virtuous souls, the sages and all the living beings. That what you created from your own potency, you afterwards enter in the form of the four kinds of bodies, as born from embryos, eggs, perspiration and seeds. By these bodies, your own parts and parcels, you know the person as an enjoyer of the senses, like a bee that relishes the sweet honey. One may guess about the authority and order of your reality of time. All we see is how you, just like the wind scattering the clouds, with your so very great force of time in the long run destroy all the planetary systems, and how all living beings equally find their end because of external causes. The madmen of this world, most greedily delighting in material enjoyment, therefrom loudly exclaim what all should be done. But all of a sudden you, vigilantly as the destroyer, seize them just like a mouse is seized by the restless tongue of a hungry snake. Which educated person who knows that one, by not respecting you, only sees the useless decay of one's body, would reject your lotus feet, the feet that by our spiritual teacher, Brahma, and the 14 Manus after him, were worshipped without hesitation or further arguing. You therefore are for us, men of wisdom, the supreme Brahman, the soul of the soul, the super soul, the destination where there is no fear at all for the destroyer Rudra who is feared by the entire universe. If you pray like this and faithfully perform your duty, there will be happiness for all of you, O purified sons of the King who have turned your minds to the Supreme Lord. Be of worship and always sing for and meditate full of praise on Him, who as the Supreme Soul is situated in both your hearts and the hearts of all other living beings. All of you, time and again read this instruction of yoga and close it in your heart. Take to the vow of the sages of always with intelligence being silently absorbed within, and practice this with the greatest respect. The person who thus regularly repeats this to himself with great attention, will being absorbed in this without delay achieve the auspiciousness of being devoted to Vasudeva, Krishna as the Lord of consciousness. Spiritual knowledge is, of all benedictions in this world, the supreme transcendental benefit of happiness for every person, because one with the boat of higher knowledge crosses over the insurmountable ocean of danger. Anyone who devotedly attached and with faith regularly studies this song of mine, this prayer offered to Him, the Supreme Personality, will be able to please the Lord who is so difficult to praise. The person who is fixed on the song as sung by me can, by dint of Him, the dearmost of all benedictions, by the Lord of the Beyond who is pleased by it, attain whatever he desires. The devotee who, rising early in the morning, with faith and devotion folding his hands, is absorbed in this prayer and thus personally listens and makes others listen to it, will be liberated from all karmic bondage. O sons of the King, by the intelligence of perfectly attentive praying and chanting this song I sang of the Supreme Person who is the Super Soul within everyone, you will ultimately achieve the results you desired, for that practice equals the greatest austerities. Chapter 29, The Conversation of Narada and King Prasinabahi. The one residing in the body that is moved by the material world, is thus for 100 years subjected to different sorts of tribulations created by nature, by other living beings and by himself. Therein abiding by the fragmentary nature of sense enjoyment, he meditates the I and mine of himself as being the doer, and thus, despite his transcendental nature, wrongly attributes to the soul the characteristics of the life force, the senses and the mind. When the person forgets the Supreme Soul, the Almighty Lord, who is the highest teacher, he surrenders to the modes of matter to find therein his happiness. Manifesting himself by those basic qualities, he then takes to lives belonging to his karma. He therein is then helplessly controlled by the performance of fruitive activities that are of a white, a karma or service in goodness, a black, vikarma or ill deeds in ignorance, or a red nature, regular karma or work passionate after the profit. Ruled by the light of goodness, one reaches better worlds, but sometimes one with passion for one's work ends up in misery, and then again, indulging in sloth or darkness, lands in lamentation. Sometimes one is a man, sometimes a woman, and then one is neither of both. Then one has lost one's mind, and then again one is a human being, a beast or a god. One is born according to the karma one has with the modes of nature. Like a pitiable dog that, overcome by hunger, wanders from one house to another in order to be rewarded or else be punished, the living entity, pursuing different types of higher and lower desires, wanders high or low, or follows a middle course, and thus, according to his destiny, reaches that what is pleasurable or not that pleasurable, heaven or hell. Even though the living being, confronted with the different forms of misery as caused by nature, others or himself, takes his countermeasures, it is not possible for him to stop the misery. All that he in fact does is what a man carrying a heavy burden on his head does when he shifts his burden to his shoulder. In fact, he, O sinless one, in a state of illusion thinks that he can counter a dream with a dream. Counteracting one karmic activity with another, one does not arrive at a definitive solution, only in counteracting the both of them that is the case. Just as there is no end to the subtle manifestation of the reflection, wherein the mind wanders like in a dream, there is neither an end to one's wandering around in material existence, in spite of the sense objects not constituting a fixed reality. In order to put an end to the succession of unwanted things, repeated births, in a material life, it is therefore for the soul of essential importance to be of unalloyed devotional service unto the spiritual teacher. He represents the being engaged in Bhakti Yoga in relation to the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vasudeva, by which the result is found of full knowledge and complete detachment. That, O best of kings, will soon come about when one always faithfully listens to and remembers the stories about the Infallible One. The Supreme Lord himself is the super-soul of all who accepted a material body. He is the controller of material nature. His feet form the shelter by which all men in this world find their fortune. He indeed is the one loved most, the subtle one from whom there is not the slightest fear. He alone is in full knowledge. Only the person who has learned this is the spiritual master, not different from the Lord. Narada said, from the karma a person engages in, the consequences are to be faced in a next life, because having died, being in one's unembodied state, nothing changes in that what belongs to him. His proof of character, the subtle body or linga, and his mind about it stay the same. The way a person, lying in bed and breathing, letting go of the gross body in a dream, in his mind has to experience the actions he in the waking state was engaged in, the same way he will fare in a similar or another animal body or another world he is reincarnated in after his death. Whatever all this mine of the mind might entail in acceptance of an I, is by the living being taken along as the workload he acquired, and by that karma he again enters a material existence. The way one derives a state of mind from one's sensual experiences and from what one does in response to them, one is likewise mentally characterized by propensities that are the result of physical actions one engaged in a previous life. Sometimes arbitrary forms pop up before one's mind's eye, and that may happen without ever having heard, seen or experienced those images before. O King, please accept from me when I tell you that to a living being, confronted with a proof of life that this way rises in the body, not a single thing can manifest itself in the mind which has not been tried, experienced or understood before. The mind of a man is indicative of the forms he has accepted in the past and will accept. I wish you all the best in a future birth, as also whether he will not take birth again. that what someone has done in another time or at another place can thus be derived from the images one sometimes has in the mind of things one in this life has not seen or heard about before. Everything that is perceived through the senses may in different ways of sequential ordering, or types of logic or individual perspectives, pop up in, and vanish again from, the heart. Every human being is endowed with a mind filled with past impressions, with the fortunate one constantly at one's side, abiding by a spirit of pure goodness, free from passion and ignorance, the world around oneself, the so-called here and now that with all those impressions can be, like with the dark appearance of the new moon, thus being connected will manifest itself crystal clear. A person is separated from this consciousness, that is thus free from I and mine, for as long as the eternal indweller, in the form of the subtle body of life signs, impressions or propensities, the linga, forms a distinct structure of material qualities consisting of intelligence, mind, senses and sense objects. In deep sleep, when one faints or in great shock, one's breath is arrested while the knowledge and thought of having an eye stops, and that also happens when one has a high fever or when one dies. Just like one with a new moon cannot see the moon itself, the linga, the self of typical life signs, the subtle body or the ego, cannot be observed of a young person in the womb and during early childhood because of the immaturity of the senses and the mind. Just as unwanted things in a dream have to run their own course until one awakens, also for a soul contemplating sense enjoyment, the wandering around in the material world will not cease, in spite of the sense objects not constituting a fixed reality. The individual soul, the jiva, is understood as a combination of the life force with the, in 16 expanded and by the 3 modes of nature ruled, typical self of life signs, the linga, expanded to the 5 objects of the senses, the 5 working and knowing senses and the mind. With this linga the person acquires material bodies and gives them up again, and thus being materially covered, finds enjoyment, lamentation, fear, misery and happiness. Just like a caterpillar does not disappear when it has to forsake its body to become a butterfly, a human being does not vanish, for as long as he identifies himself with the material body he had, when he dies after the termination of his material activities. Because the mind, transported by the linga, is the ruler of man, it is the cause of the continued material existence of all the embodiments created. When one thinking of results always to the point of death continues with one's actions for the sake of sense enjoyment, one is by the illusion of those actions karmically bound to another physical body. In order to counteract that, therefore with all your heart and soul engage in the devotional service unto the Lord and consider therewith the cosmic manifestation as being controlled by Him from whom there is maintenance, creation and annihilation. Canto 6. Chapter 4, the Hamsa Guhya prayers offered to the Lord by Prajapati Daksha. The Supersoul residing within the bodies of all living entities is the Lord and controller of all. Try to see those bodies as His residence and may He thus be pleased with you. Anyone who by inquiry into the nature of the self manages to subdue the powerful anger, which suddenly can awake like a bolt from the blue, transcends the modes of nature. Daksha said, "My obeisance is unto him from whom we learn the proper way to transcend the modes and the material energy to which all living beings are bound, unto him, the self-born controller beyond measure and calculation who in his abode cannot be perceived by a materially directed intelligence. My reverential respect for the friend with whom one lives in this body and of whose friendship a person has no knowledge, just as the sense objects have no knowledge of the sense organ that perceives them. The living being has knowledge of this body with its types of breath, its internal and external senses, its elements and sense objects that, material as they are, do not know themselves, each other or anything outside of them. But the living being knowing about the natural modes and all these matters, on its turn, has no knowledge of him who knows each and all. I praise him, this unlimited Lord. When the mind has come to a stop in the absorption of yoga, and thus all names and projections of material vision and remembrance have ceased, one will perceive him in his unique spiritual completeness. Him, that swan-like personality who is realized in the purest state, I offer my respects. The same way as they who are experts in sacrificing extract the fire, dormant in firewood, by singing the 15 hymns, the devotees discover him who with his spiritual powers hides in their hearts that are covered by the 3 modes of nature and the 9 aspects of matter. He who is realized in bliss when once sitting passively in meditation, frees oneself from the complete of the illusory diversity, he of all names, he, the gigantic form of the universe, may he, that inconceivable reservoir of all qualities be merciful unto me. Whatever one expresses in words, ascertains by contemplation, perceives with the senses or has in mind, everything that exists as an expression of the 3 modes, cannot be his essential nature. One knows him in truth only as the cause of the creation and destruction of that what is characterized by the modes. Everything is situated in him, everything originated from him, and everything is moved by him. Everything belongs to him, and everything is there for him. Whether he acts or incites to act, he is the supreme cause of our material and spiritual existence known to all. He is Brahman, the cause of all causes, the incomparable one beyond whom no other cause can be found. My obeisances unto that unlimited, all-pervading Lord of all transcendental attributes about whose many energies the speakers of the different philosophies, in dispute and agreement concerning causes, in their creativity are continuously bewildered about the true self, the supersoul. The subject matter discussed in the philosophies of analysis and yoga unification of consciousness, leads, with professing knowledge of the one absolute truth, wherein one is of agreement about the beneficence of the transcendental, greater cause, to a perception of differing, opposing characteristics of what would be the absolute, as form, and would not be the absolute, as formless. In order to bestow his mercy upon the devotees at his lotus feet, he, the eternal, supreme personality who is not bound to any name or form, manifests with the forms and holy names he takes birth with and engages in action. May he, the transcendence in person, be merciful unto me. He who, by the material paths of knowledge, manifests from within the core of the heart according to the desires of each living being, receives material qualities the way the wind does that blows over the earth and thus assumes the forms of the demigods. May he, my Lord, fulfill my wish to be allowed in his service. Chapter 9, Appearance of the Demon Vritrajura. He, the one controller who by his transcendental potency created us and by whose mercy we also may create a world of matter, can, although he stands in front of us as the actor, not in his form be recognized by us, who consider themselves separate controllers. When we are heavily tormented by our opponents, he who exists eternally comes to our rescue age after age with his material potency and different avatara forms among the sages, the human beings and the animals, in order to protect each and everyone near and dear to him. He, the Godhead and true self of us all and of every other living being, is the transcendental, original cause, the primary principle of nature, the supreme enjoyer whose energy is known in the form of the universe, from which he himself stands apart. He is the refuge we can all surrender to. He, that great soul, will bless us, his devotees, with all good fortune. O Lord, let there be our obeisances unto you, O Bhagavan Narayana, O Vasudeva, O original person, O highest personality, O supreme giver of insight, O most auspicious one, O transcendental benediction, O greatness of mercy, O changeless support of the universe, only proprietor of all worlds, ruler over all and husband of Lakshmi Devi. The best of those completely detached wandering all around the world, fully purified by their transcendental absorption in devotional yoga, push, by the strength of their dutiful respect of being swans of the Supreme, open the door of this illusory existence that gives access to a consciousness in the spiritual world that is free from contaminations. Thus, personally experiencing the continuity of your lordship, one finds happiness. You, on closer scrutiny, are the essence of authenticity, the controller of all and everything spiritual and material. You are there as the cause of all causes of the entire universe, who with all qualities are present within all, up to the minutest atom. You are, with the temporality of all manifestations, the only one who remains. For that reason, these exalted devotees, who relating to you but once tasted a drop of the nectar of your glories and with the continuous flow of bliss within their minds forgot about the vague and limited reflection of the sights and sounds of material happiness, have faith in you alone as the Supreme Personality, the only and dearest friend of all living entities. How can those devotees, whose minds are of a complete and continuous absorption, O killer of Madhu, or who, as said, are hands-on experts in having accepted you as the dearmost lover and friend, then never give it up to serve your lotus feet that never again allow a return to this material ocean? Therefore, O Supreme Lord, what can we, as sparks of the original fire, tell you? You who personally are amused to be engaged in creation, destruction and maintenance with your divine energy, you, who as the supersoul and spirit of the absolute Brahman resides in the hearts of all the different living beings and externally are present according to time, place and the physical constitution, you, whom one realizes as the cause of what constitutes the existence and consciousness of the living being, you, as the witness of all that is going on, as the witnessing itself and the embodiment of the eternal memory of the entire universe. Because you are our Supreme Lord and the Master of Transcendence, please arrange for us a position in the shadow of the 1,000-petaled lotus flowers that are your feet, so that we may be relieved of the pain resulting from the dangers and desires of this conditioned existence that made us approach you. You, the swan-like Lord who has his abode in the kernel of the heart where you supervise the actions of the individual soul, you, that manifestation of Krishna whose reputation as a redeemer is so bright, you, who are without a beginning and who are solely understood by the pure devotee, you, the path in this world, the friend and refuge, you, the ultimate goal of that elder brother to perform sacrifices for, we offer our obeisances. Chapter 16, King Citraketu meets the Supreme Lord. Just as means of exchange like gold pass from one person to the other, the same way the individual soul passes through different species of life by different fathers. One always sees that the ties one has in human society with matters like money or the other sex are temporary. One claims ownership for as long as one relates to it. So too the eternal, individual soul identifies itself in a certain birth with a body for as long as that soul is situated in it, even though the soul actually has no specific material identity. This living entity is factually eternal, imperishable and most subtle. It constitutes the self-effulgence of all the different embodiments, the master who manifests himself as this material world by means of the gunas. It is not of like and dislike or of mine and thine. It is the one witness to the different sorts of intelligence and performers of good and bad deeds. The original soul is not of the happiness and harm resulting from fruitful actions, perfectly neutral residing in the heart. He is the Lord overseeing cause and effect. Bhagavan Narada, who was very pleased with him being such a surrendered devotee in control of himself, next, as he had promised, disclosed the following knowledge of the Lord in the form of a prayer. O my Lord, my obeisance unto you, the Supreme Lord Vasudeva. Let me meditate on Pradama, the Lord of Intelligence, Aniruddha, the Lord of the Mind, and Sankarsana, the Lord of the Ego. All my respects for the full manifestation of wisdom, the embodiment of supreme bliss, the self of delight and peace, because of whom one turns one's vision away from the dual world. The waves of the material ocean calm down by the realization of your personal bliss. My reverence for the supreme controller of the senses, my respects for you whose expansions are unlimited. May he, the one without a second who, being completely spiritual, cannot be expressed in words, be caught in a form or be comprehended by the mind, may he who is transcendental to cause and effect, protect us. The way all pottery is created from earth, consists of earth and returns to earth. Everything is born from him, exists by him and vanishes in him. Him, the Supreme Brahman, the Absolute Truth, I offer my obeisances. I bow before him who, as vast as the sky, has expanded outside and inside, and who by the mind, the intelligence, the senses and the life airs cannot be touched or known. The body, the senses, the life air, the mind and intelligence are all parts that are penetrated by the supporting, connecting and ruling principle of Brahman. These parts, just like iron that cannot be forged if it is not heated, cannot engage in activities without that support and acquire with that support the status of an independent seer. My obeisances unto you, my Lord, O Supreme Personality, most perfect Supersoul and Master of all mystic powers, whose feet are embraced and caressed by the multitude of lotus-bud hands of the topmost devotees. All my respects for you who are situated in the highest position. Citraketu said, O unconquerable one, you are conquered by those who are of self-control. You give yourself in utter compassion to those devotees who, as surrendered souls conquered by you, always sing your glories with minds free from desire. With a false notion of independence, the creators of this universe, who are only a part of you, in vain compete with each other for your dominion that consists of the creation, maintenance and dissolution of this cosmic manifestation, O Supreme Lord. Without yourself having a beginning, an in-between or an end, you have your existence, from the smallest material unit to the complete of the universal manifestation, in the beginning, in the end and in between, that what is constant in the beginning and in the end is there also in the middle of the existence of all. This egg-shaped universe, consisting of the 7 layers of the earth element and the rest, each of which measures the tenfold of the preceding one, is but insignificant compared to the billions of similar universes that exist in the cosmos. Therefore, you are called unlimited. Eager to enjoy like animals, O Lord, man worships only parts of you, the demigods, and not the supreme of you. The benedictions they bring are finished at the end of their term, just as it is with politicians. A mind ruled by lust, just like fried seed, does not lead to growth and healing in you, O Supreme One. But in the full knowledge of your Supreme Self, a person is not affected by the networks of duality of the material qualities. They who on the path of liberation are of worship, were conquered by you, O Unconquerable One, when you as their teacher spoke about the process of devotional service. They are the faultless souls who do not crave for material happiness. They are the great sages satisfied from within. Engaged a different way, as in demigod worship, one lacks in consciousness and arrives in human society thus at the I and mine and the me and you, of the false ego. In approaches other than yours one is, as a result of the deviating vision, impure in one's conduct, time-bound and full of a dharma. In what sense is it beneficial for oneself, for others, or for whatever purpose, to be turned against oneself, one's own body, or against others in one's religiosity? Such a practice of human self-betrayal raises your anger, torments one's fellow man and contravenes the Dharma. Your view, defining the process of devotional service, is free from inconsistencies. They who following that course are equal towards all living beings, whether they move or not move, is certainly a civilized person. This absence of internal conflict in you, O my Lord, puts an end to the sins of anyone who sees you, your devotees and your book, before his eyes. But once hearing your name, forthwith delivers even the lowest among man from the misery of material existence. Seeing you now here before us, O Supreme Lord, has removed the contaminations from our mind. And why would it be different from what the great Rishi of enlightenment, Narada, your devotee, has said? O Unlimited One, you as the super soul of all the world, know everything done by each living entity out here. What we know compares to the light of fireflies relative to the sun of you as our teacher of transcendence. All obeisances unto you, O Lord of the continued existence, the ending and creation of the universe. The position of you as the transcendental swan, The ascetic of the highest order is beyond the ken of those who unify in a false notion, a material notion, of independence. The senses gathering knowledge perceive in pursuance of your perception, and they who endeavor to rule the universe do so to the example of your endeavoring. Let there be my obeisances unto you, the Supreme Lord with the thousands of hoods, by whom the gigantic universe you carry on a single hood, appears as insignificant as a mustard seed. I, the cause and soul of all beings, having expanded as all beings, exist in my two continuous forms of the spiritual sound vibrations and the Supreme Brahman. The living entity expanded into the world and the world expanded within the living entity. These two, the world and the living entity, are created and pervaded by me. A person asleep sees in his dream the entire world within himself, but upon awaking he finds himself lying down somewhere. The different states of consciousness and conditions of life of the living entities one must likewise consider as manifestations of the Maya or dreaming potency of the original self, knowing which one should always remember their supreme creator and witness. Know me as that all-pervading soul, the Supreme Spirit free from the modes of matter, by dint of whom the sleeping bewildered person then may acquire insight in what belongs to the dream and what to his happiness. When the person manages to remember himself, his spirit soul, his jiva, as the connectedness of both the states of consciousness of being asleep and being awake, he may, beyond that spiritual knowledge, reach the Supreme Brahman that is transcendental. The living entity, having forgotten about this spiritual nature of my position, leads because of that a materially conditioned life in separation from the Supersoul, as a consequence of which it wanders from one body to the next, from one death to another. Achieving in this world a human birth offers one the chance to arrive at self-realization with the support of this spiritual knowledge and wisdom, but they who fail to acquire that knowledge will never find peace and happiness. Thinking of the trouble of toiling in this world and then achieving the opposite of what was intended, and then remembering how one is free from fear being disinclined, one should, thus knowing better, desist from such karmic desire. Husband and wife, being materially motivated, perform activities for the sake of their happiness and to be free from misery, but they neither end their distress nor achieve happiness. Those who consider themselves very smart but this way attain the opposite of what they wanted, find it extremely difficult to understand what it means to be of progress with the soul and what it means to exist in turiya, in the meditative state, apart from the three states, sleep, waking and unconsciousness. Someone who by his own experience and power of understanding or by the process of listening to others is freed from the allurement of the material world, may, fully satisfied by that knowledge and wisdom, then become my devotee. The realization of the insight to this qualitative notion of the oneness of the individual soul and the transcendence of the quantitative Lord, constitutes, all things considered, the ultimate goal of life for capable and intelligent human beings who unite in Bhakti Yoga. If you with faith, not concluding differently, accept these words of mine, O King, you will soon find your perfection in full awareness of the spiritual knowledge and its wisdom, its practical application. Canto 7. Chapter 6, Prahlada instructs his Asura schoolmates. Sri Prahlada said, someone intelligent should in this rarely obtained human birth from early childhood on practice the Dharma of devotional service unto the Lord. This life, even though temporary, is ruled by that purpose. Because he is the most kind-hearted and beloved living being, the master of the soul, to approach the feet of Vishnu constitutes the path for the person to follow in this world. By divine ordinance sensual happiness, O Daityas, is available everywhere to all embodied beings, just like the unhappiness one runs into without having asked for it. There is no need to endeavor for that material happiness, one would only waste one's life because nothing is gained that way. You see, the lotus feet of Mukunda, the Lord of Liberation, constitute the ultimate goal of life that brings lasting happiness. A mindful person having a material life in a human body should therefore, for for as long as he is still healthy and strong and not decrepit, go for the real benefit of Mukunda. Of the 100 years that he has for his life, a person in service of his senses spends half his time uselessly by being drowned in darkness, ignorantly passing the night with sleeping. In one's childhood one is naive, and in one's teens one plays, and thus 20 years pass, and it takes another 20 years in which one, having aged, cannot engage because of being physically incapacitated. And the rest of your life you spend as a fool because you, in the grip of family matters, are bewildered by formidable lusts that can never be satisfied. What man can free himself when he attached to his household, being bound by the ropes of love, misses the control over his senses? How can someone who thinks that making money is more important than living in devotion and gratitude, forsake that acquiring for which emergent, thief and public servant risks his dear life? How can one give it up to associate privately with one's loving, pleasing and attractive wife? How can one refrain from one's love for the sons and daughters one enshrined in one's heart, from one's brothers and sisters and the care for one's needy parents? How can one be indifferent about household matters as nice furniture, a good income, pets and rows of servants and maids? By giving priority to the interest of the tongue and the genitals, one fosters all kinds of desires that can never be fulfilled, and thus one is engaged like a silkworm that spins itself in its own cocoon. How can such a massive illusion be forsaken? Constantly plagued by the threefold misery of life, as caused by nature, by others and himself, he does not regret the pleasure he derives from his family, but being materially infatuated, the maintenance of his family shortens his lifespan without him ever understanding what the real purpose of life would be. That purpose he lost. With a mind set on wealth, he learned that it is wrong to cheat for the sake of money. Nevertheless, he, after having died, is tied to this material world by Maharaja, sentenced to take another birth. Without mastering his senses, he with his insatiable lusts as a family man was guilty of theft after all. Despite knowing this, O sons of Danu, someone taking care of his family does not find time for his self-realization and the realization of the Supreme Self, as a consequence of which he, being estranged, gropes in the dark with the mine and thine conception of life like that of animals. Nobody will ever, wherever or whenever, with a poor fund of knowledge excel in liberating himself. Because one, as a sexual plaything hankering after the gratification of one's lusts by that attachment, founds complete families put up with the same problem of darkness. You, my dear friends, in this respect have to keep yourselves far removed from seeking refuge with the demon of being addicted to sensual pleasures. One instead should approach Lord Narayana, the original Godhead, who through the association of liberated souls chalks out the path of the liberation that you seek. It is not hard to satisfy the infallible one, O Asura's sons, because he has established himself everywhere in this world as the perfection of the self of all living beings. He is the one present within all beings, high and low, beginning with the simplest plant life up to Lord Brahma. Within the single elements and all their transformations, as also within the totality of the material energy, within the balanced state of the modes of nature as also within their perturbation. He is the one and only transcendental original source that is the Supreme Lord, the controller who is free from decay himself. Considering the original position of his inner presence and his outward personal manifestations, he is both the pervaded that can be described and the undifferentiated, all-pervading supreme transcendence that defies description. He is the changeless and undivided one consciousness in the form of bliss and understanding. He is the supreme controller about whose unlimited opulence one is mistaken because he is hidden from view by the illusory energy that is ruled by the modes of material nature. Be therefore merciful towards all living entities. When you with a friendly attitude give up the Asura mentality, of friends opposing enemies, you will satisfy the Lord beyond the senses. With him, the eternal and original one, being satisfied, nothing is out of one's reach. Why would those who are thus of service in this world that is ruled by the modes, have to work for a sense of duty, regulating the lusts, the economy and the religion that follows automatically from this devotion? Would we, having risen above the modes, be of desire when we are singing about his feet? The prescribed threefold of Dharma, Karma and Artha, the knowledge of the soul, of the three Vedas, of the logic, of law and order and of the different professional identities, I all consider to be the surface truth of the lesson to be learned, but it is one's full surrender to the Supreme Friend that leads to the deeper realization of one's personal relationship with the Transcendental Person, the Svarupa. This knowledge free from material contamination is most difficult to attain. It was explained to Narada by Lord Narayana, the friend of all men, for the sake of all souls who are exclusively of surrender to him, the Supreme Lord. That understanding is possible for those who do not care anymore for material possessions and bathe their bodies in the dust of the lotus feet. I received this spiritual knowledge concerning the Bhagavata Dharma of devotional service unto the Lord in 9 aspects, together with its practical application from Narada, who does not care about a material life and only has eyes for the Lord. Chapter 7, What Prahlada Learned in the Womb. One observes all the 6 conditions of the body beginning with birth, just like they are seen with the fruits of the Lord in the form of a tree that come about, exist materially, grow, transform, dwindle and perish, but these changes do not apply to the soul. The soul is eternal, does not dwindle, is pure, is an individual, is the knower of the field and the original foundation, the unchanging, self-illumined, actual cause that pervades all, independently and immutably. By contemplating these 12 transcendental symptoms of the soul, a conscious person is impelled to give up the false conception of I and mine originating from the illusion that is attached to everything that belongs to having a body. Gold being locked up in stones is by the gold diggers in different ways won in the gold mines and easily extracted by the experts. The experts concerning the difference between spirit and matter can the same way from within the fields constituted by organic bodies with the help of spiritual processes extract the Brahmin essence that is the goal. The teachers of example speak of 8 types of material energy, 3 modes of nature and 16 modifications, the senses of action and perception, the elements and the mind. The individual living entity, the person, is the one element connecting all the others. The body that moves about or stands still combines all these 24 elements and is thus characterized by this duality of spirit and matter. Thus equipped one for the sake of the authenticity of the person has to say not this, not that, neti. That is the way to turn away from everything that is not the soul. Sober and thoughtful persons are of a mind that is purified on the basis of discriminating that connectedness within and independence from the material world that is ruled by creation, maintenance and destruction. The original person of transcendence is he who oversees the movements of the intelligence in the waking state, the dream state, and deep sleep. One should ascertain the original position of the soul by neti turning away from the division of the mind that is produced by the different actions of the intelligence in touch with the 3 modes of material nature, just as one can notice the presence of air by its different odors. This constitutes the entrance to the transcendental position within this ocean of matter in which one is caught in the operating modes of material nature, the same way one is caught in a dream. Therefore from the bottom of your heart you must burn the weeds of all karma of being conditioned by the modes of nature, in the yoga realizing the cessation of the stream of consciousness. Of the thousands of processes this method is offered by the Bhagavata, the Lord, the pure devotee and the book, offers the process of yoga that once being followed quickly will bring about the love for the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Properly wait upon a guru with faith and devotion, offer all that you acquired, be of association with the saintly and devoted ones and be of worship for the Lord. Have faith in the discourses about the Lord, sing about his qualities and activities, meditate on the feet and exercise respect in worship of the deities. Understanding that Hari, the Supreme Lord, is situated in all living beings, one should be of the highest regard for all creatures and their needs. When one thus manages to subdue the 6 symptoms of sensual weakness, lust, anger, greed, illusion, madness and jealousy, devotional service is rendered to the Lord, to Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality with whom one finds love. Hearing about the uncommon activities and great power of his exploits and his qualities as demonstrated by the pastimes of his different appearances, there will be horripilation, tears, a faltering voice and loud chanting, shouting and dancing because of the great jubilation associated with it. Like being haunted by a ghost, there are sometimes laughs, exclamations, meditative moods, exercises of respect towards other living beings, prolonged heavy breathing and utterances like, "O Lord, Master of the world, Narayana." That way being absorbed in thoughts about the true self, one is free from shame. When one is immersed in thoughts of love about him, one is freed from all obstacles on one's path and harmonized in one's body and mind. This happens because the so very powerful seed of desire is burned by the exercise of bhakti. That is how one achieves attains, the Lord beyond the senses. When one constantly keeps in touch with attains, the contaminated mind of an embodied being in this world is halted and the cycle of this material existence is ended. Those who are advanced know everything about that spiritual heaven of happiness. Be therefore, from the core of your heart, of devotional service to the Lord of hearts residing in your heart. And why would the worship of the Lord as the space for others in one's heart be a problem, O Asura sons? With him always present there is the soul to one's soul and the friend of all possible living beings. Why would it be necessary to endeavor for ordinary sensual pleasures? Wealth, women, one's animals, children and all that, houses, land, elephants, a treasury, luxury and all the money and that sense gratification is by the one whose lifespan is but short and inevitably has to die, lost in a second. What pleasure can one derive from such a temporary thing? Similarly, the higher worlds that are achieved by great sacrifice are all perishable. However comfortable they might be, they are not flawless, and therefore he whom one never heard or saw making a mistake, the Supreme Lord, is the one to be worshipped for one's self-realization with the bhakti we talked about. Because of the material knowledge in support of the many activities in which one is engaged in this world, one may consider oneself highly advanced, but time and again man achieves the inescapable result of the opposite of having degraded for the sake of a material purpose. The determination of the achievement-oriented person to be happy and to be free from misery out here is an ambition that always leads to unhappiness, because that desire obscures the interest of the lasting happiness that is the result of a more laconic attitude concerning material outcomes. For the purpose of obtaining the desired objects that he wants in his ambitions, the living being in this material world needs to be embodied. This perishable body embraces the soul, but serving other purposes than lasting happiness, it is directed elsewhere. What can one say? One is ultimately separated from that upon which one based one's self-esteem, one's children, wife, home, wealth and all that, the realm, the treasury, the elephant, the ministers and servants and the relatives. Of what value to the soul is all of this? These trivial matters concerning the perishable body appear to be necessary, but they are useless for attaining the nectar ocean of eternal happiness. Just ask yourselves, O Asura sons, of what interest it would be for someone to be embodied in this world and from the time of his conception in all stages of life suffer the consequences of his karma. Someone embodied engages in result-motivated actions with the body he acquired as a consequence of what he did in the past, and because he performs these actions in ignorance, he obtains yet another body. Therefore, worship selflessly the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Lord, the soul of the soul, who is free from desire and upon whom depends the fulfillment of the desire to regulate one's sensual pleasure, religion and income. The Lord and Master of all living beings is the beloved, original source of life, who with the 5 elements of nature created all these individual souls as manifestations of his cosmic intelligence. Whether one is a god, a demon, a man, a ghost or a singer of heaven. All who render service to Mukunda's feet will find the fulfillment that we have found. Being a perfect Brahmin, a fine godly person or a saint, O Asura descendants, will not suffice for pleasing Mukunda, nor will good conduct or vast learning. Neither will charity, austerity, worship, cleanliness nor vows suffice. The Lord is satisfied by unalloyed devotional service, the rest is pretentious display. O Danava sons, recognize him, the soul and master of all living beings, everywhere in each and all is your self-interest, and then be of devotional service unto him, the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. O Daityas, the ghosts and demons, the women and the laborers, the cowherds, the birds, the animals and the sinners, without any doubt all can arrive at and be part of the qualities of the infallible one, of Achyuta. The supreme self-interest of a person in this world is to see Govinda everywhere and to be of unalloyed devotional service unto him. Chapter 9, Prahlada propitiates Lord Nrisimhadeva with prayers. But I do fear, O merciful Father of care, that intolerable, ugly repetition of birth and death, to be thrown into the miserable condition of having to live among predator-minded people and to be bound to the actions and reactions of karma, O insurmountable one. When do you please with me, call me to the base of your feet that constitute the refuge in this ocean of matter. Because of taking birth, one is in one's pleasurable or not that pleasurable existence of being united with the world, separated from you and burned by the fire of lamentation, irrespective the body one resides in. Moreover, one suffers just as well by the remedies against this misery of taking the body for the real self. I, O greatest being, am wandering around in this existence. Please tell me how to be of service in your yoga. I will that way, from constantly hearing the narrations handed down in succession about your pastimes as the well-wisher and supreme Godhead, O Lord Nrisimha, easily cross over this ocean of matter and be free from being contaminated by the modes of nature. In association with the liberated souls, I will find liberation from all the misery with your 2 feet as my home. All the things that you personally do not care about but which are cherished by those who are locked up in a physical body, only have the appearance of a remedy, the parentage that is the shelter for a little child, O Nrisimha, the medicine for a patient, the boat for a person drowning in the ocean, or the measures taken for a person suffering from a certain material condition, O Almighty One, all constitute but a temporary solution. Whatever situation it may concern, whatever seems to be the reason, whatever time it might be, by whatever agent and relating to whatever agent, caused by whatever agent or for the sake of whatever agent, whatever the way of something or of whatever nature something might be, is certainly all but another form of the supreme reality. Stated differently, in nature one finds because of all kinds of changes a specific form of separateness, but whatever form it may concern, it is always a manifestation of your lordship's energy. The illusory of matter creates a mind that constitutes the source of difficult to control fruitive actions. These actions are conditioned by the time that agitates the modes of nature and is respected in a certain way by the person. Thus, being defeated by the alluring but deluding material energy, one is tied to the 16 spokes of the wheel of rebirth, the senses of action and perception, the elements and the mind, O unborn one. Whoever can get out of this by anything else but your way? You are that one element of time to the tender mercy of which the soul eternally is left being defeated by the modes of your rule. I here present as a form of material energy who in all his forsaking and appearing is subjected to your cyclic control, am powerless, O Lord and Master. I am crushed under the wheel with the 16 spokes. Please help me, this soul of surrender, to get out of this, O Almighty One. O Almighty One, I have seen how people in general desire the longevity, opulence and glory of the pious leaders of heaven. But our Father, wishing this all for himself, was simply by the provoked laughter of your expansion as Nrisimha in the blink of an eye pulled down by you and completely vanquished. Therefore, I do not covet to live as long as Lord Brahma or be rich and mighty. I know where all this foolish blessing of the senses of the embodied being leads to. I have no desire to be closed down by you who are so powerful as the master of time. Please take me to the side of your servants. How can one in this body that is a host to so many diseases be blessed with things that sound good but are like a mirage in the desert? Despite knowing this very well, the people try to put out the fire of desire with difficult to obtain little drops of honey, temporary happiness, but they do not get out of it. What is my position now? How can I surpass the fact of being born from a family far removed from the enlightened state into the darkness of a body that is moved by passion? The lotus hand of your causeless mercy that you offered me on my head as a token of grace would not even be available to Lord Brahma, to Lord Shiva, or the goddess of fortune. From the side of your lordship as the friend of the entire world, there can be no question of discriminating between higher and lower-born living beings. Nevertheless, there is a view to pending the service, like with a desire tree, the benediction reserved for the ones who serve you, whether they are of a higher level or not. The common man who in his material existence runs after the objects of his desire fell into a blind well full of snakes. I, who by bad association just like such a person fell into that condition, was by the Sura sage Narada, O Supreme Lord, taken into confidence and led to the truth of the soul. How could I ever give up on the service of your pure devotee? This universe all around us constitutes the oneness of you alone. You exist separately of this universe that has a beginning, a middle and an end that you created by means of the three modes of nature. Those primal qualities give shape to your external potency. Everything making up the diversity owes its regulation to you who entered it yourself. O Lord, you are there as the entire universe or else as the one separate from it. You are the cause and the effect. The distinction between the material energy of your creation and you as being another self is a mistaken notion. The substance of something is equal to the substance of the form in which it appears, that what constitutes you is equal to that what the manifestation of the creation that is maintained and annihilated consists of, just like it is with the tree and its seed and the earth and her seasons. With you attracting this universe within yourself, you experience, within the ocean being immersed in yourself, the spiritual state of bliss while you seem to be doing nothing. But with you in the uniting of your consciousness, having closed your eyes, you also have imbibed the sleep. Without keeping material sleep and the modes of nature, you are then engaged in the union of the highest state of consciousness, Turiya, or the fourth state. The mind that is not tuned to your transcendental topics is because of the sins it sympathizes with in its far being removed from the Lord of Vaikuntha, polluted, dishonest and hard to control. Filled with desires and lusts, it is because of the therewith associated urges of highs and lows, fears and distress. Tell me how I, with such a mind being poor and fallen, must understand your supreme purpose. The tongue pulls me in this direction, O infallible one, and the genitals not being satisfied pull me that way. Likewise, the skin, the belly and the ear are going for this and the nose is running after that, while the eyes are looking for yet another thing. Thus, the eager, busy senses all together bring one down like a householder is brought down by his co-wives. This way, because of one's karma having fallen into the Vaitarani river at the door of death, one alas, one after the other, birth and death, eating all kinds of foodstuff, suffers from an ever-increasing fear in seeing how the living being, caught in his own body and entangled in the association with other bodies, is of enmity and friendship. O you who from the other side of that river wants to show us your kindness, we in this world at present are nothing but a bunch of fools. O Master of all, we friendly people are always eager to be of service in this matter. O Supreme Lord, what would be the difficulty for your great compassion to deliver us materialistic fools from the cause of time and again having to set up, keep going and come to naught with our karmic endeavors, O friend of the ones in need? O Supreme One, because my mind is absorbed in the singing and proclaiming of your sweet ocean of glories, I am free from worries about the hard-to-cross Vaitarani that is this world. I am more concerned about those fools who, missing the liberation in carrying the load of their sensual interest, are making plans in favor of illusory forms of happiness and dutifulness. O Godhead, saints ambitious for their own salvation generally in silence wander in remote places, not being very much interested in a life for the sake of others. But I do not, like they do, want to leave aside my fellow man in misery. I do not desire liberation for myself alone. I cannot accept it to see other people wander around oblivious of this shelter you offer. Everything associated with household sexual happiness is as trivial as rubbing one's hands to find relief from an ache. The miserable person is by this kind of its relief sex not freed from all his discomfort and uneasiness, and thus serves all kinds of unhappiness. Only when one recognizes that kind of imaginary happiness and manages to tolerate the itching, one can develop intelligence, stability and energy. Silence, vows, Vedic knowledge, austerity, study, dutifulness, explaining the scripture, living alone, prayer and absorption, belong to the path of liberation. But these matters, these 10 activities of emancipation, are often part of a method of making a living that is practiced by people who have not conquered their senses at all, O my Lord. Thus, one in this context may wonder whether one deals with hypocrisy or not. The forms of your spiritual cause and material effect as explained in the Vedas are like the seed and its sprout. But you being without a specific form are also not any of these 2 forms. Those who are connected in your yoga, the Bhakti Yoga devotees, can clearly see both these aspects before their eyes like wood and the fire in wood, and this cannot in any other way be achieved. You are the air, the fire, the earth, the sky and the water, the sense objects, the life force, the senses, the mind, the consciousness and all assisting divinity belonging to it. You are all of that, the unique of the natural reality of the modes as also the one beyond it all. O my Lord, whatever that is manifested or is expressed in the mind and by words, it is no one else but you. Neither all the modes of nature, nor their predominating deities, neither the complete of the cosmic intelligence, the false ego, the gross and subtle elements, the senses and their objects, nor those who are so mindful in association with all the godly ones and the mortals who all have a beginning and an end, O Lord glorified by all the saints. None of them is truly capable of covering all that is yours, and therefore do all intelligent people at this point rest their case and engage in your devotional service. I therefore offer you, O best of the worshipable ones, my obeisances and engage with prayers in your worship, work for you, remember you, cherish your lotus feet and always listen to the talks about you. How can a person without honoring you in all these 6 ways ever be of bhakti for you who are the goal of the best ones of transcendence? Canto 8. Chapter 3, Gajendra's Prayers of Surrender. The son of Vyasa, Shukar, said, with that decision he, Gajendra, led by his intelligence, focused his mind on his heart by reciting a supreme prayer he had practiced in a previous birth. Sri Gajendra said, my obeisance is unto the original one, the supreme Godhead who moves this materially controlled existence to consciousness. Let me meditate upon him, that personality who is the root cause, the supreme controller. The universe rests in him, exists because of him and originates from him. I surrender to him, that independent Godhead who is our cause and who is transcendental to us. He who from his own energy expanded this cosmic manifestation that sometimes is manifest and sometimes has vanished, in both cases oversees all and everything as the witness. I beg that root soul, the supreme transcendence of the beyond, to protect me. When in due course of time everything in this world has come to naught, when all the worlds and all their maintainers and directors and everything that was active has ended, there is a dense and deep darkness, above and beyond which he, the Almighty One, is radiating. When a dancer dances, it is difficult to understand the different appearances he makes. The same way the gods, the sages and the common creatures cannot understand his movements nor express them in words. May he who is so hard to grasp give me protection. the Lord of those who long to see his all-auspicious lotus feet, of those who are free from all attachment, of the great sages who faultless in the forest, highly elevated above the material world, practice their vows in accordance with the different spiritual positions in life, the Lord of those who are equal and friendly towards all, he is my destination. He who is without birth has no karma, no name or a form, nor does he have qualities or faults. He who is the destruction and the creation of this cosmic manifestation, nevertheless by his own potency occasionally engages in personal activities as an avatara. I offer him my respects, the Transcendental Lord, the Controller, the Supreme Brahman of unlimited potency who without a form has assumed forms and performed so many wonderful activities. I offer him my obeisances, who is the enlightenment of the soul, the witness present within all, the Supreme Self, him who defies description, the mind and even consciousness. For him who by the ones inspired free from karmic reactions can be reached through the mode of goodness, for the master of emancipation and salvation and bestower of happiness, there is my respectful reverence. I offer my obeisances to the Lord of Peace, the Lord of Equilibrium who free from the modes assumes the form of the modes in a dangerous or animal appearance. I dedicate my prayers to the Lord of the diversity of spiritual knowledge. My respects for the knower of the field, for you the superintendent of all, the witness and the original person who are the primal source. You, the origin of the material creation, I offer my obeisances. You are the one whom I respect because you oversee the motives of the senses. You are the source of all forms of belief concerning the apparent reality that one takes for real because it is a reflection of you. With respect for that reflection, my reverence for you, I offer you, the causeless supreme cause of all, my obeisances. You who are the miraculous root cause of all, the science of the sacred tradition and the great ocean, I honor you, the granter of liberation and the shelter of the transcendentalist. I honor him who is the fire of consciousness hidden in the wood of the modes of nature, him whose creative spirit spurs into action when nature loses its equilibrium, him who personally reveals himself to those who gave up on the formal approach because of their spiritual understanding. I offer my obeisances to him, the immaculacy of infinite mercy, who releases a surrendered animal like me from being entangled. You, the Supreme Unlimited Lord, he who is celebrated as the direct witness within, you who are ever attentive by a single part of yourself, the Paramatma, I offer my respects. You are difficult to attain for everyone who is overly attached to his mind and body, to his offspring and relatives, to his home, wealth and support. But for those liberated souls who absorbed in the soul are not disturbed by the modes of nature, you are present in the core of the heart. I offer you upon whom one always meditates, you the reservoir of all spiritual knowledge, you the Supreme Lord and Controller, my respects. They who desire Dharma, Artha, Karma and Moksha worship him and thus succeed in attaining their desired objective, not to mention other benedictions, he even endows one with an immortal spiritual body. May his unlimited mercy bring me salvation. They who are fully surrendered to the Supreme Lord are, by reciting and hearing about his all-auspicious, wondrous activities, immersed in a notion of transcendental bliss. With no other but him as their purpose in life, they do not desire any other benediction. He, the eternal and absolute spirit of transcendence, the Supreme Master of all great personalities, the unseen soul above and beyond all who in yoga can be reached by devotional service is, because of his subtle and elusive nature, out of reach of the senses. Him the unlimited, all-inclusive origin I worship. The different moving and non-moving entities, the Vedic knowledge, the gods, Brahma and the ones belonging to him as also his less important expansions, were created by the Lord with all their names and forms. Just like sparks that emanate from and merge with the fire and rays of light that emanate from and dissolve in the sun, there are similarly time and again the manifestations from the modes of nature of creations and creatures of intelligence and mind, senses and of the gross and subtle aspect of the body, that as parts and parcels repeatedly originate from and merge again with the Lord. He, that fire, is neither a demigod nor a demon, neither a human being nor an animal. He is neither feminine nor masculine. neither neuter nor another kind of creature. He is not the fruitive action nor the mode of nature, neither the manifest nor the non-manifest. He is the conclusion of the exclusion of this or that, of neti. All hail to him, the one unlimited. I do not want to live like this in the world. What is the use of this captivation from within and from without in being born as an elephant? I do not want the misery and destruction because of the time factor. I want to be liberated from that covering of my spiritual existence. I bow down before the transcendental shelter, the unborn absolute spirit who created the universe, who is the universe and who is beyond the universe, who is the knower of the universe and the soul of the universe. The devotees and ascetics who with yoga subdued their karma see him, the Lord of Yoga, clearly in their hearts. I offer him my obeisances, my respects again and again for you, the force of whose threefold energy is formidable, you the intelligence of the completeness, the Lord of all qualities who shelters the surrendered souls and whose deluding potency of Maya is difficult to overcome, you who are unattainable for those on the path of bad sense control. I seek my refuge with him, the Supreme Lord whose glories are unfathomable, whose self is not known by the common man and by whose forces and intelligence I have been defeated. Chapter 5, the fifth and sixth Manu and the prayers of Brahma with the Suras. Sri Brahma said, the unchanging one, the truth unlimited, the original cause in everyone's heart, the undiminishing, inconceivable, evanescent, intangible, and indescribable one, the unsurpassed and greatest Godhead most desirable, we gods all do offer our obeisances. I seek my refuge in the Supreme Spirit of the life force, mind and intelligence of all living beings, the one ever vigilant to everything objective, the senses and the knowledge, the one immaculate, impartial shelter and light of all the ones in darkness. In him the infallible Lord of the ether of all the three yugas, in the fourth he is there as his own devotee. Let us offer our obeisances to the truth of him, whom one considers the axle of Lord Brahma's lightning fast revolving, sacred wheel of time with its 15 spokes, the knowing and working senses and the 5 airs, 3 naves, the modes, and 8 segments, the 5 elements, mind, false ego and intelligence, that feed one's thought process. He admits to one cause, that of goodness, and is transcendental to the material darkness. He who is not manifested, cannot be located, is unlimited and beyond all measure, is carried by Garuda on his back and is by the unperturbed and sober person worshipped with the vehicle of yoga. No one can defeat his illusory energy of Maya. People in general, being bewildered by that energy, do not understand the real purpose of life. We offer him our respects who is in control of the self and its material qualities, Maya, him ruling all living beings, who is the transcendental controller equal unto all. You, being present inside and outside and kindly disposed towards us, the gods, who rely on a body created from goodness, cannot even be understood by the saints and sages for being this most subtle destination. He who as I became the deity of the sun who leads the God-conscious ones on their threefold Vedic path, who is the gate for the realization of the nectar of eternity, the absolute truth and one's liberation, and also constitutes the cause of one's death, may that all-powerful Lord be contented with us. By following his life force, his breath in all moving and not moving living entities, by following that prana, the vital air, as the basic principle, like subjects who follow an emperor, one finds all the strength and vitality. May he, the all-powerful Lord, be satisfied with us. The material elements, their weaver, time, fruitive labor, karma, the modes of nature, the gunas, and the individual differences brought about by his creative potency, Yoga Maya, constitute a difficult to fathom completeness from which the great sages turn away in their aversion against the delusional quality of the material world. May he, the controller of all and everything, be contented with us. Let there be our respectful obeisances unto him, the soul of all souls, who, free from endeavoring in not depending on a profit motive, is of peace, unto him who just like the ether does not attach to matters of the external energy that, ruled by the natural modes, incites the senses. Not even the slightest activity properly performed for your sake is in vain, because being dedicated to the controller, who is the time, you are realized as the original soul, friendly and beneficial to all persons. The way one by watering the root of a tree also waters the trunk and the branches, it is also with the worship of Vishnu, the soul of everyone. I offer you my obeisances, O Lord of eternity, O worker of the wonders of a higher existence, O controller of the modes who are now established in goodness. Canto 10. Chapter 14, Brahma's Prayers to Lord Krishna. Who, O greatest supreme Lord, O super soul and master of yoga, knows where and how, to what degree or when in the three worlds your pastimes occur, you expand the play of your spiritual energy, Yoga Maya. For that reason, this complete whole, which is untrue in its form, is just like a dream wherein one's awareness is covered by all kinds of distress, while one inside of you finds your unlimited forms of consciousness, eternity and happiness. That what seems to be true outside, on the other hand, originated from the material energy. You are the one soul, the original personality, the oldest one, the truth, the light from within, without a beginning and an end, the eternally unchangeable, unimpeded happiness free from impurities, the complete whole without a second that is everlasting and defies all description. They who from the sun-like spiritual master received the perfect vision of the confidential philosophy, can see you, the very soul, the super soul of all souls, being described as such. They are the ones who easily cross over the ocean of an untrue worldly existence. For those who do not understand you as being the Supreme Soul, for that reason alone a totally material life unfolds that disappears again with spiritual knowledge, just as with a rope in illusion the image of a snake may appear and disappear again. Designations of being bound to matter or being liberated rise from ignorance. When one realizes that the two have no separate existence, one is situated in the true knowledge and unhindered consciousness as it is, free from Maya of the Supreme Transcendental Self. They at that time lose their meaning, just as day and night are matters doubtful to the sun itself. Oh, how ignorant the foolishness is of persons who think of you, the original soul, as being something else and about the self as something to be looked for as someone present in the outside world. The realized devotees, the sages, who reject everything that is not that, look for you within themselves, O unlimited one. How can such a person of discrimination appreciate the true nature of the rope he sees before him without rejecting the therewith associated illusion of seeing a snake? Chapter 40, Akrura's Prayers. Sri Akrura said, I bow down to you, O Lord Narayana, cause of all causes, O original inexhaustible person, O you from whose navel the lotus sprouted on the whirl of which Lord Brahma appeared, who generated this world. Earth, water, fire, air, ether and its source, the false ego, the totality of matter and its origin, the Purusha, the mind, the senses, the objects of all the senses and the demigods belonging to them, together constitute the secondary causes of the universe that have generated from your transcendental body. They, under the outer direction of the material realm, have because of that lifelessness no knowledge about the true identity of the Supreme Self, your soul. Also, the unborn one, Brahma, being bound to the modes of material nature, cannot know your form transcendental to these modes. It is to the honor of you that the yogis perform sacrifice, you the Supreme Personality and controller within each, within the material elements and within the ruling gods and saints. Some Brahmins worship you, with respect for the three sacred fires, by means of the mantras of the three Vedas elaborately with various rituals for deities of different names and forms. Some who strive for spiritual knowledge, attain peace by renouncing all fruitive actions and worship the embodiment of knowledge, the Guru, the Lord, by means of sacrifices in the field of spiritual knowledge. Others, whose intelligence is purified by the principles included by you, worship you, absorbed in you, as the one form assuming many forms. Still others worship you, the Supreme Lord, in the form of Lord Shiva, by treading the path described by Lord Shiva that in different ways is presented by many teachers. Even though they as devotees of other divinities are of a different attention, they all worship you who as the controller comprises all the gods. Just like the rivers that, filled by the rain and springing from the mountains from all sides, enter the ocean, O Master, similarly all these paths, of the demigods, finally lead to you. All the conditioned living beings, from the non-moving ones up to Lord Brahma, are caught in the qualities of goodness, passion and ignorance of your material nature. I offer you, the soul of all souls, my obeisances who, with a detached vision are present as the witness and the consciousness of everyone, as he who, with this stream of the material modes that was created by your lower energy, deals with the souls who identify themselves therewith as gods, human beings and animals. O Supreme Lord, the individual souls in this world are bewildered by your deluding material energy and are, because of the false conceptions of I and mine, made to wander along the paths of fruitive activities. As for my own body, children, home, wife, wealth, followers and so on, I too am deluded and foolishly thinking that they would be true, O Mighty One, while they are more like dream images that come and go. Thus, groping in the dark with a mentality of wishing to enjoy a world of opposites, I, in not being of the true self or what is eternal and taking misery for the contrary, fail to know you who are my dearmost self and soul. Like a fool overlooking water that is covered by plants or like someone running after a mirage, I have turned away from you. With a pitiable intelligence because of material desires and actions, I could not find the strength to check my disturbed mind that by the so very powerful, willful senses was diverted from one thing to another. In this condition, I now approach your feet that for any impure person, I think, are impossible to attain without your mercy. Only by serving the truthful a person can develop your Krishna consciousness and put an end to the cycle of rebirth in this material world, O Lord with the lotus navel. I offer my obeisances to you, the embodiment of wisdom and the source of all forms of knowledge, you, the absolute truth of unlimited potencies who rules over the forces in control of the conditioned person. My reverence is there for you, the son of Vasudeva, in whom all living beings reside. You I prove my respect, O Lord of the senses, please protect me in my surrender, O Master. Chapter 87, The Underlying Mystery, Prayers of the Personified Vedas. Sri Parikshit said, O Brahmin, the absolute truth cannot be described in words and has no material qualities. How can the revealed scriptures dealing with the modes of nature directly refer to that what is elevated above cause and effect? Sri Shuka said, though intelligence, senses, mind and the life force of the living beings were by their Lord and Master evolved for the sake of dealing with elementary matter, for the sake of getting a life and for the sake of the emancipation of the soul and its ultimate liberation. The predecessors, like the Kumaras, of our predecessors, like Narada, were fixed upon this same underlying mystery, Upanishad, concerning the absolute truth. Whoever with faith holds on to it will be free from material attachment and attain peace and happiness. I will here relate to you now an account concerning Lord Narayana. It is about a conversation between Narayana Rishi and Narada Muni. Sri Sanandana said, when he, Mahavishnu, after having created this universe withdrew for the sake of its dissolution and was lying asleep, the Vedas in person awakened the Supreme One with descriptions of his characteristics, the way a sleeping king by his court poets is awakened when they as his servants approach him at dawn with recitations of his heroic deeds. The Vedas said, all glories, O all glories to you, please unconquerable one, defeat the eternal illusion that assumed the form of the natural modes and constitutes the human weakness. Because you, who in your original status are complete with all opulences, at times engaging with your spiritual and material energies awaken the powers of the mobile and immobile embodied beings, awake them to consciousness, you can by us, the Vedas, be supported. The world we perceive is by the seers regarded as a product of something greater, of Brahman, something that, no more than clay, as a resource undergoes any change itself, being transformed in forms that dissolve again. For that reason, the seers dedicated their minds, words and actions to you. Where else could the footsteps of men be placed than on the ground they are walking? Your people of enlightenment, O Master of all the three worlds, therefore dive deep into the nectarian ocean of narrations about you, that eradicate the impurity and put an end to their troubles. It is therefore not that surprising that they who by the power of their own minds dispelled the unwanted qualities of the identification with one's temporality, O Supreme One, experience the uninterrupted happiness of your abode in their worship. They who, like a bellows, are just displacing some air as they breathe are full of vitality only when they are your faithful followers, for you, who are elevated above cause and effect, constitute the underlying reality from whose mercy the universal ego, the material complete, the separate existence, the ego, and the other aspects of creation were produced. Adapted to the particular forms of the living being, you then appear here as the ultimate form among the different gross and subtle physical coverings. Among those living according to the standards of the seers, they who are engrossed in their vision worship the abdomen, while the arunis, the superior yogis, first of all fix their attention on the prana knot of the subtle energies of the heart. From their O unlimited one, they move their attention upward to the head that is your abode, and then they go to the highest destination from which they, having reached it, never again fall down into the mouth of death. Entering in a certain manner the by you differently created species of life as their motivation, you become visible depending the higher or lower form of your own created beings, just as fire manifests itself depending the form ignited. You thus existing among them as the real among the unreal, are understood as being one unchanging, equal manifestation of love by those who free from material entanglements have spotless minds. The person residing within the bodies he owes to his karma is, as an expansion of you who are the possessor of all energies as is stated by the Vedas, in fact not of the external, the gross body, nor of the internal, the subtle body, but is by these bodies enveloped. When scholars of the scriptures have developed faith in ascertaining the status of the living entity as being of that manifestation, as an expansion of yours, they worship your feet as the source of liberation and the field in which all offerings are sown. By diving deep into the vast nectar ocean of the adventures of the forms that you have assumed to propagate the hard-to-grasp principle of the soul, the few souls who found relief from the fatigue of material life do not even wish to be liberated from this world, O Lord. This is so because they, after abandoning their homes, found association with the community of the swans, the transcendental people, at your lotus feet. This body useful for serving you, acts as oneself, one's friend and beloved. They however who last fail to delight in you, rather find the degradation of the physical frame in successive births, in spite of you as their very self being favorably disposed, helpful and affectionate. As a matter of fact, they, failing to find their way with their great existential fears, cling to material desires and are thus self-destructive, soul-killing, in their worship of the unreal. That what by the sages with their breathing, mind and senses being brought under control in steadfast yoga is worshipped in the heart, is also attained by those who remember you in enmity. We will likewise attain you and, being equally considered by you, equally relish the nectar of the lotus feet that the women enjoy whose minds are attracted to your arms that are as firm as mighty snakes' bodies. Ah, who out here, who but recently was born and soon will die, has an inkling of the one who came first from whom the leading seer Brahma arose, who was followed by the two groups of demigods controlling the senses and the principles. When he lies down to withdraw, at that time nothing remains of the gross and the subtle, nor of that what comprises them both, the bodies, and the flow of time and the sastras are also no longer there. They who, teaching with authority, declare that life springs from dead matter, that what is eternal would end, that the soul would not be one and that doing business would constitute reality, they who state that the living being thus would have been produced from the three modes, are fixed upon a dualistic notion born from ignorance. Such a thing cannot exist in your transcendence, in you who are the essence of full perception. the temporality of forms and thus the untrue threefoldness and its mind phenomena up to the human beings, appear in you as if they would be true. They are illusory but, because they are transformations non-different from him, they are nevertheless not rejected by the knowers of the soul, for they consider the entirety of this world as something true. These forms and also persons, created by him who enters his creation in person, are for that reason recognized as being parts and parcels of the true self, just as gold is not different when being assigned different forms. They only who worship you as the shelter of all created beings do not worry about death and simply put their feet on his head, but with your words you tie up even the scholars the way one ties up animals. They who consider themselves your friends thus arrive at purification and not so much those who turn their face away. You are the self-effulgent causeless one free from the senses who maintains the power of the sensory functions of all creatures. The demigods together with the unborn Lord Brahma take part in paying you tribute and partake of the offerings carried, just as the local rulers in a kingdom together with the sovereign who rules the entire country are of respect for you and enjoy their share. That is how they who are the appointed leaders perform their duties in fear of you. The species of life that manifest themselves as stationary and moving are by your material energy motivated for action. But that can happen only when you, the one aloof, O eternally liberated one, cast your brief glance thereupon by assuming your forms for having your pastimes in the material world. To you, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, no one can be a stranger or a friend, just as the ether can have no perceptible qualities. In that sense you are like the void of space. If the countless embodiments of the living beings would be eternal, the omnipresent time as a consequence would not be such a sovereign rule, O unchanging one. But it is not otherwise. Because the substance cannot be independent from that from which it was generated, you, the regulator who are the time, must be known as being equally present everywhere, as the fourth dimension. When one supposes that one knows you materially, one is mistaken in the falsehood of an opinion on the local order. Material nature, Prakriti, and the person, Purusha, do not find their existence at a particular point in time. Not originating as such from one or the other, it is from the combination of these two that living bodies find their existence in you, just as bubbles find their existence as a combination of water and air. And just as rivers merge into the ocean and all flavors of flower nectar merge into the honey, these living beings with all their different names and qualities enter and merge again into you, the Supreme. Those who are wise understand how much your Maya bewilders human beings and frequently render traditional service unto you, the source of liberation. How could therefore the ones who faithfully follow you be any kind of fear about a material existence, a fear that by the three-rimmed wheel of time of past, present and future, by your furrowing eyebrows, repeatedly is raised in those who do not take shelter of you? The mind being conquered by the senses and the breath is like a horse not under control. Those who in this world strive for regulation but have abandoned the feet of the Guru, find, being most unsteady with the various methods of control, full of distress, hundreds of obstacles on their way, O unborn one. They are like merchants sailing on the ocean who failed to employ a helmsman. What do servants, children, a body, a wife, money, a house, land, vitality and vehicles mean to human beings for whom you became their very self, the embodiment of all pleasure? And what at all would those who fail to appreciate the truth of him and carry on with their indulgence in sexual matters bring real happiness in this world that is subject to destruction and, in itself, is lacking meaning? The seers free from false pride who, with the greatest piety, on this earth direct themselves at the places of pilgrimage and the sites of his pastimes, have installed your feet in their heart and destroy all sins with the water of their feet. They who but once turn their mind towards you, the Supreme Soul of eternal happiness, will never again devote themselves to the homely affair of a family life that steals away a person's essential qualities. If someone says, "From the real of God the real of the universe has manifested," that can certainly be doubted and refuted. The combination is inconsistent, for it is true in a number of cases, while it is an illusion not being so in other cases. For the sake of worldly purposes, rows of people with a dark vision like to consider it alternatively and bewilder, with different meanings and implications of your numerous words of wisdom, those who are not using their minds with the ritual praises. Because this universe did not exist in the beginning and after its annihilation neither will exist, can be concluded that what in between appears within you, the sole object of love, is the untrue. We understand this universe thus as an unreal, illusory combination of different categories of the real primal substance, while the less intelligent ones prone to falsehood consider this mind game as real. By reason of the insurmountable presence of material nature, he, the living entity, reconciles himself to that undeveloped state and, in taking to her qualities, the gunas, accordingly assumes forms. Bound to those forms he is deprived of spiritual qualities and runs into the facts of birth and death. You yourself on the other hand leave her, the material energy, aside like a snake that sheds its skin and are in your eightfold greatness glorified as the one unlimited in his glories, who is endowed with all spiritual qualities. When those who restrain themselves do not uproot the desires in their hearts, they, in their impurity, cannot reach you who have entered their heart. They are like someone who has forgotten the jewel he hung around his neck. Yoga practitioners who are satisfied with an animalistic life will be unhappy in both worlds, here and hereafter. Here about death, they cannot escape, and hereafter about you whose kingdom they cannot attain. Someone who understands you is not concerned about the favorable or unfavorable, good or bad that is associated with the body he has assumed. Neither does he care about what others say. O you of all qualities, day after day he fills his ears with the song that is heard in every age through the disciplic succession. For that reason, the children of Manu, the human beings, consider you the ultimate goal of liberation. Neither the masters of heaven nor even you can reach the end of your glories, O unlimited one, O you within whom the many universes by the drive of time, each in their own shell, are blown about in the sky like particles of dust. The Sruti-sparing fruit by neti, eliminating that what is not the absolute truth, find in you their ultimate conclusion. And thus, I have answered your question, O King, on how the mind can be engaged in the absolute truth without material qualities that cannot be expressed in words. He who watches over this universe in the beginning, the middle and the end, he who is the controller of the unmanifested matter, pradhana, and the individual soul, jiva, he who sent forth this universe, entered it along with the individual seer and producing bodies with him regulates them. He because of whom one surrendering abandons the material energy one embraces the way a sleeper abandons his body, is the Supreme Lord upon whom one incessantly should meditate to be free from fear. Chapter 88, Lord Shiva saved from Vrikasura. The king Parikshit said, the demigods, demons and human beings who worship the austere Lord Shiva are usually rich and enjoy their senses, contrary to the ones who honor Lakshmi and her husband, the Lord Hari. We are in great doubt about this and would like to understand this matter of the contradictory destinations of the worshippers of the two lords, who are of such opposite characters. Sri Shuka said, Saiva, who is always united with his Sakti, covers the natural modes with the three characteristics of his emotion, his authority and his darkness. He thus constitutes the embodiment of the threefold principle of false ego. From them the 16 transformations, lingas, have manifested of the mind, the 10 senses and the 5 elements. Someone who turns to the ruling deity of any of them will enjoy all kinds of material wealth. Lord Hari, however, the original person, is transcendental to material nature and absolutely untouched by the modes. He is the inner witness seeing everything. By worshipping him one is freed from the influence of the gunas. The Supreme Lord said, from the one I favor I gradually take away the wealth. Wanting he will suffer one distress after the other and be abandoned by his friends and relatives. When he failing in his attempts to endeavor for money gets frustrated and becomes friends with my devotees, I will show him my mercy. When one, intelligent with the wisdom, understands that the subtle, pure, eternal spirit of the Supreme Infinite Brahman constitutes one's true self, one is freed from samsara. Leaving me aside because I am most difficult to worship, people worship others from which they quickly find satisfaction in receiving royal opulence. Having become arrogant, proud and negligent they, surprisingly, then insult those whom they owe the benedictions. Canto 11. Chapter 3, Liberation from Maya and Karma, Knowing and Worshipping the Lord. The Honorable King Nimi said, "My lords, please tell us about the illusory potency or Maya of the Supreme Lord Vishnu. We would like to understand that what bewilders even the great mystics. We enjoy the nectar of your talks about Lord Hari, but we are not yet satisfied by that antidote against the pain a mortal experiences being tormented by the misery of samsara." Sri Antariksha said, "Their soul of all living beings evolved, by means of the elements of the greater creation, all creatures high and low, O mighty armed one, so that they, the original person's own parts and parcels, could be successful with the choice between the sense objects and the true self, the soul. Having entered the living beings that thus were created with the help of the 5 gross elements, and having divided himself as the one witness to the 10 senses of perception and action, he was pleased to engage them in a life with the modes of nature. The living being, that by the Supreme Soul was given a life with the modes, enjoys those modes and consequently takes this created body for the true self as also himself for the master, and thus becomes entangled. The proprietor of the body is because of the sense-motivated actions, driven by desires and engaged in different karmic fruitive activities from which he reaps the different fruits. And thus, he moves through this world in both a state of happiness and the contrary thereof. This way by his karma reaching destinations that bring him a lot of things that are not so good, the living being till the end of time helplessly experiences birth and death." The Honorable King said, "O great sage, please tell how even materialistic people with ease may overcome this material energy of the Lord that is so unsurpassable for those lacking in self-control." Sri Prabhupada said, "One should see that people who live as husband and wife, with their endeavors to lessen the distress and to gain in happiness, achieve the opposite result. What happiness can one expect from the unsteadiness of having a home, children, relatives, domestic animals and the hard-to-acquire wealth which always gives distress, that mean death to the soul? Know that the idealized world for which one thus settles, is founded upon fruitive labor, cannot be sustained and is characterized by matters like a loss of behaving properly in groups of equals and with superiors. Someone eager to know about the highest good, should therefore take shelter of a spiritual master who resides in the supreme tranquility of the absolute truth and is also well versed in the conclusions of the Vedas. With the Guru as one's sole and worshipable deity, one should learn the science of devotional service by which, free from illusion being of faithful service, the Supreme Soul can be satisfied who bestows his own self. One should first of all detach the mind from everything and properly, with mercy, friendship and reverence for all living beings, cultivate association with devotees. That entails inner and outer cleanliness, penance, tolerance and silence, scriptural study, simplicity, celibacy, non-violence and equanimity concerning the known opposites. In solitude, without attachment to a fixed residence, wearing old rags and satisfied with anything, one should with the Lord constantly kept in mind, meditate upon the omnipresent true self. With faith in the scriptures about the Supreme Lord and not blaspheming other scriptures, one should with respect for the truth and with one's mind, speech and activities strictly controlled, be innerly peaceful and master one's senses. Hearing, chanting and meditating the incarnations, pastimes and qualities of the Lord whose activities are all wonderful, one must do everything for his sake. Whatever worship, charity, penance, japa or piety one performs, everything held dear, one's wife, sons, home and very life heir, one should dedicate to the Supreme. In rendering service to both the moving and non-moving living beings, one must be of friendship with the common man as also with the devotees, the great souls who accepted Krishna as the Lord of their heart. By the glories of the Lord one may find in mutual discussions, in being attracted to each other, in pleasing one another, and in one's together putting an end to material activities, the purification of one's relation with the soul. Remembering him and reminding one another, the bhakti unto the Lord who puts an end to the chain of sins, because of that devotion leads to an awakening whereby the body responds with goosebumps. Sometimes one cries by the thought of Achyuta, sometimes one laughs or takes great pleasure or speaks, acts wondrously, dances and sings, and sometimes one, following the example of the unborn one, is freed from distress and becomes silent while attaining the Supreme. Thus learning about the Bhagavata Dharma and taking lessons from the consequent bhakti, someone named at Narayana will easily overcome the Maya that is so difficult to defeat. The Honorable King Nimi said, "Please, all of you expert knowers of the Supreme, be so kind to speak to us about the transcendental position of the Supersoul of the Absolute Truth, that is associated with the name of Narayana." Sri Pipalayana said, "O King, know that the Supreme gives life. It is that on the basis of which the senses, the life air and the minds of the bodies of all living beings are moving. It constitutes the cause without cause of the creation, destruction and maintenance of this universe that exists in the state of wakefulness, in the dream state and in the unconscious state, as also external to these states of consciousness. This supreme truth cannot be covered by the mind, by the faculties of speech, sight, intelligence, the life air, or by the senses, just as a fire cannot be covered by its own sparks. Not even the Vedic word may express it, for the Vedas deny that the Supreme Self can be expressed in words. It can only be achieved by indirect expressions, by words that refer to that without which there would be no ultimate purpose to the scriptural restrictions. In the beginning being one, it thereafter became known as the threefold of goodness, passion and ignorance of the gunas that is associated with the power to act and the power of consciousness of the I-awareness that one calls the individual living being. Assuming the forms of spiritual knowledge, actions of the senses and their objects and good and bad results, it thus possesses a great variety of energies. It is the Supreme alone that as the Absolute Truth is manifest beyond both the relative of the gross and the subtle. This soul, never born and never dying, grows nor decays. It is the knower of the stages of life of the living beings that are subjected to change. That soul, omnipresent and everlasting, which is pure consciousness, became many jivas, just as the one life air by the power of the senses resulted in a variety of vital forms. With beings that originated from eggs, with embryos, with plants and with that what is difficult to discern in moisture, the vital air accompanies the same individual soul from one life form to the other, just as the self, apart from the thought process, invariably stays the same, with the memory restoring when one awakens from a deep sleep in which the ego and the senses had merged. When one desires the feet of him with the lotus navel, the dirt in the heart that was generated by the modes of nature and the fruitive action, is cleansed away by the power of bhakti. After one then is purified completely, the truth of the soul is directly realized, just as the rising sun becomes visible to the naked eye. The Honorable King said, "Please explain to us the karma yoga by which a person being purified in this life quickly gets rid of his fruitive actions and, freed from karmic reactions, achieves the Supreme." In the presence of my father Ikshvaku, I in the past asked the sages, the Kumaras, a similar question, but the sons of Brahma did not reply. Can you speak about the reason for this? Sri Avahatra replied, "Right action, non-action and wrong action are Vedic subject matters, not a worldly subject, and since Vedic knowledge comes from the Lord himself, even such great enlightened souls easily get confused about this matter. Offering guidance to ignorant human beings, the Vedas in covert terms prescribe material activities to be freed from karma, the way one also prescribes a medicine. Someone ignorant who has not subdued his senses and fails to do what the Vedas say, will by his lack of dharma following a wrong course of action, achieve death time and again. When one according to what the Vedas prescribe without attachment performs and sacrifices for the sake of the Supreme Lord, one will certainly achieve the perfection that to raise interest is put in terms of fruitive results. Someone who quickly wants to cut the knot of attachment in the heart that binds the soul to the body, should, with respect for the regulative principles, worship Lord Kesava as also study the divine as described in the supplementary Vedic literatures. Chapter 6, Retirement on the advice of Brahma and Udhava addressed in private. The gods said, "We with all our intelligence, senses, vital air, mind and words bow down at your lotus feet, O Lord, the feet upon which they meditate in their heart who are connected in the love of striving for liberation from the powerful grip of karmic consequences. You, by engaging the material energy consisting of the three modes, create, protect and destroy the inconceivable cosmic manifestation within yourself while being situated within those modes. Nevertheless, you are by them not entangled in karmic activities at all, O unconquerable one, because you, the irreproachable Lord, are always absorbed in your unrestricted happiness. O worshipable one, the purification of those persons who have a contaminated consciousness is not as much brought about by incantations, respecting injunctions, study of the scriptures, charity, penances and rituals, O greatest of all, as it is caused by listening to those souls who are situated in pure goodness and have a fully matured and transcendental faith in your glories. May there for us be your lotus feet, the fire that annihilates our inauspicious mentality and that by sages desiring the real benefit is carried in their appeased hearts, the fire of your four forms of soul, ego, mind and intelligence, that 3 times a day is worshipped by the self-controlled devotees so as to reach beyond the material heavens and acquire an opulence like yours. Upon your feet they are meditating, O Lord, who, having folded their hands, pour the ghee they took into the fire of sacrifice in the process of understanding the 3 Vedas. Upon them the yoga practitioners are meditating who, inquisitive about your yogamaya mystic potency, are united in the realization of the true self. But they are fully attained only by the most elevated devotees. Chapter 10, The Soul Free, the Soul Bound. The Supreme Lord said, "A soul free from desire who accepts my shelter, should practice the Varnasrama system of behaving oneself in society, conscientiously performing the personal duties that I spoke about. A purified soul should understand that all endeavors of embodied souls who, focused on the sensuous self, take the material qualities for true are doomed to fail. Just as the sensuous matters that the meditator sees in the realm of sleep or in his fantasy do not help him because of their messy nature, also the intelligence is ineffectual when being led by the senses that follow a diversity of outer selves. Devoted to me, one gives up one's active life and engages in a contemplative life. When one is fully absorbed in self-inquiry, one is no longer bound to the injunctions for performing material labor. Devoted to me, one should at all times respect the vow of yoga and its regulated practice as good as one can, as also respect a guru who knows my form and is peaceful under my control. Humble without false pride and jealousy, be industrious in devotion, non-possessive, fixed in friendship, without haste, interested in inquiring and free from spite and idle talk. Remaining neutral with an equal vision towards one's wife, children, home, land, relatives and bank account and such, one should recognize one's self-interest in that of others. The soul is the self-enlightened seer, different from the gross and subtle body, just as fire-emitting light as it burns differs from the firewood. Like the different qualities of being dormant, manifesting, being large or small that there are of the fire, there are also the qualities of the material body that by the higher self, having entered it, are accepted. This body, which was constructed by the modes of nature expanding from the original person, ties the living entity to a material existence from which it breaks away by the knowledge of the soul. One should therefore, by cultivating knowledge, Get in touch with the pure, transcendental supreme soul situated within oneself and gradually give up this concept of the material affair. The Acharya can be compared to the lower part of a pile of kindling wood, the disciple to the top part, and the instructions to the kindling stick used in between, while the knowledge that brings happiness is there like the fire that brings light. This purest intelligence of the souls of experience, the Acharyas, drives away the illusion originating from the gunas and then, being raised by those modes, finds peace itself, the way a fire burns up when it runs out of fuel. For the controllers and enjoyers of karma there is of course the eternal duality of happiness and grief, time and place, to have and to be. When you take all that is matter for eternal and complete, your intelligence is ruled by all the different forms and changes belonging to it. All living beings thinking thus Yudhava, again and again will find themselves being born, fall ill, die and so on. After all, being united with the form one is bound to the conditioning limbs of time. In this, one can clearly see the lack of independence of the karmic controller as also the happiness and unhappiness of such an enjoyer. What purpose is served by someone that helpless? Among the embodied beings the fool is sometimes unhappy and even the sage is not always happy as well. Wishing to be happy always is a useless endeavor and in fact something most egotistical. Even if one manages to achieve happiness and escape distress, one still has no direct knowledge of the yoga process by which death loses its power. What guarantee of material happiness would a material object or lust be able to provide the person? With death never pleasing close at hand, such a thing gives no satisfaction, like with a person condemned who is led to his place of execution. What we heard about heaven, as also what we know from our own experience, earth is spoiled by rivalry, fault-finding, lapse and decay. Just like with agriculture where many obstacles are in the way of a happy result, it is useless to desire the perfect material happiness. When one manages to perfectly practice one's righteousness, dharma, without being troubled by hindrances, even the status one thus acquires will not last forever. Please, listen therefore to the following. On earth, having worshipped the gods with sacrifices, the performer goes to the heavenly worlds where he may enjoy like a god the celestial pleasures he achieved. Shining in the temple because of his accumulated merit, he, being surrounded by goddesses wearing charming clothes, enjoys, while he, as he leaves this earth, is glorified with songs by the singers of heaven. Surrounded by the sounds of bells, he fares to his desire with the heavenly women, but while relaxing comfortably in the pleasure gardens of the gods, he in his delight has no awareness of his downfall. After for long having enjoyed the heavens until his pious credits were used up, having exhausted his merits, he against his will falls down from heaven, not properly fixed, being forced from his course by time. When he, due to his material involvement, is engaged in actions against the Dharma or, not having conquered his senses, lives wantonly as a miserable, greedy philanderer, is of violence against other living beings, kills animals against the rules and worships hordes of ghosts and spirits, a living being will, once he passed on, helplessly there upon land in the deepest darkness of the hellish worlds. He will, because of what he did, again have to accept a material body to perform therewith activities that again cause him great grief in the future. What happiness would someone find swearing by activities that invariably lead to death? In all the worlds exists fear of me, in the form of time, among all their leaders, the individual souls living as long as a kalpa fear me, and even the one supreme, Brahma, who lives for 2 paratas, fears me. The material senses, stimulated by the modes of nature, give rise to activities, and the individual soul, the jiva, who is fully engaged by the materially oriented senses and the gunas, undergoes the various karmic consequences. As long as there is the differentiation of the modes of nature, there will be the different forms of existence of the soul, and as long as there are these different states of the soul, there will be karmic dependence. As long as one is not free from this dependence, there will be fear for the Lord and Controller, who is the time. They then who enjoy this karmic bond will become bewildered and always be full of sorrow. With the given reciprocal action or the operation of the modes of nature, one calls me variously the time, the soul, the Vedic knowledge, the world, nature, as also the Dharma. Sri Udhava said, even though the one embodied is present in the midst of the modes of nature, he is not necessarily bound to what incessantly operates upon him from the material body, like happiness and distress. In other words, how can it happen that someone, as a free soul, is caught in the grip of the modes, O Almighty One? How is he situated? How does he enjoy, or by what symptoms can he be known? What would he eat, or how would he evacuate, lie down or sit? Please explain to me what I ask you, O Infallible One, O best answerer of questions. This at the same time being eternally bound and being eternally liberated is something confusing me. Chapter 11. Bondage and Liberation explained in the devotional service of the saintly person. The Supreme Lord said, one cannot really say that one is bound or liberated here due to my modes. To be in the grip of the natural qualities or to be free from them is not caused by my illusory energy. There is lamentation, bewilderment, happiness, distress and the acceptance of a material body because of illusion. Material life repeating itself is merely an idea of the soul that is just as unreal as a dream. Please Udhava, understand that knowledge and ignorance are two forms of myself that, created by my original potency, give rise to the liberation and bondage of the embodied beings. The bondage of the living entity, that is part and parcel of my oneness, O great intelligence, is there since time immemorial because of ignorance, and the opposite, of liberation, is there because of knowledge. Let me now, my dear, dilate on the different characteristics of the opposing nature of being conditioned and being liberated, an opposition that is found in one and the same practice. Two birds of a similar nature and friends of each other, one day make a nest in a tree. One of them eats from the fruits of the tree, while the other does not eat, even though he is the strongest of the two. The one not eating the fruits of the tree is conscious and knows both himself and the other one, while the one that eats does not have a clue. The latter is always bound, while the one full of knowledge is eternally liberated. Although engaged in a body, an enlightened person does not abide by the body, like having risen from a dream. A foolish person abides by the body even though he is not engaged in the body, like seeing a dream. Someone not enlightened is invariably obliged to the false ego that thinks in accord with the senses that are directed by the gunas and the sense objects also generated. The ignorant soul who thus, by fate ordained, was caught here in this body because of his by the gunas generated karmic activities, thinks, I am the doer. An intelligent person is not bound that way. Wherever he goes, rests, sits, walks, bathes, sees, touches, smells, eats, hears and so on, he is detached with the qualities he experiences. Though being situated in the material world, he, turned away from its ruling powers and assisted by the most expert and in detachment sharpened vision, cuts with all doubts. Just as the sky, the sun and the wind do not attach themselves, he neither attaches to the separateness of things, the duality of the world, like he has awakened from a dream. The person whose functions of the life breath, senses, mind and intelligence are free from desires, is liberated, despite being situated in a body that is ruled by the natural modes. One's body is sometimes for some reason attacked by animals or destructive people, and sometimes one is worshipped by a lover or a follower. An intelligent person is never seriously moved when that happens. With an equal vision having moved beyond the notion of good and bad, a wise man will neither praise those who are behaving very well or speaking excellently, nor criticize others who are acting or expressing themselves poorly. Someone satisfied within should live free from acting, without saying a word and not contemplating good or evil, and that way wander around like being dumb. When one desirous of knowledge thus gives up the misconception of a material diversity as existing separately of the soul, one should put an end to one's materialistic life and fix one's purified mind upon me, the all-pervading one. In case you are not able to steady your mind on the spiritual platform, then dedicate, not deviating from the regulative principles, all your actions to me without expecting anything in return. The Supreme Lord said, when someone is merciful, causes no harm, is tolerant towards all embodied beings, is firmly anchored in the truth, an irreproachable soul, is equal-minded and helpful towards everyone, when someone is of an intelligence that is not disturbed by material desires, is of restraint, is soft-natured, pure-hearted, non-possessive, not worldly, eats little, is peaceful, steady, has me for his shelter and is thoughtful, when someone is vigilant, a profound soul, of a firm resolve, has conquered the different forms of material misery, offers respect, inspires, is friendly, compassionate and learned, when someone knows the qualities and shortcomings as taught by me, and, worshipping me, is even willing to give up all his religious preferences, he belongs to the best of the truthful ones. Whether someone knows me like this or not, knows who I am or how I exist, when he is exclusively devoted to me, I count him among the best devotees. Chapter 12. The Confidential Secret Beyond Renunciation and Knowledge. Just as sages fully absorbed lose the awareness of names and forms, like they are rivers entering the water of the ocean, also they whose consciousness was intimately bound to me had no awareness any more of their bodies, their present or their future. Therefore, O Yudhava, give up the religious precepts and prohibitions, denial and routines and what you should listen to and have listened to. Choose for me alone, the actual shelter of the soul within all embodied beings. With that exclusive devotion you will enjoy my mercy and have nothing to fear from any side. The Supreme Lord said, He, the living being in person, the Lord, is manifest within along with the prana. He after all entered the heart and has his place in the subtle sound vibration that fills the mind with the grosser form of the word sounds that are different intonations of short and long vowels and consonants. Just as fire confined within wood, with the help of air, kindled by friction is born very tiny and increases with ghee, I similarly manifest myself in this inner voice. Speech, the function of the hands and legs, the genitals and the anus, smell, taste, sight, touch and hearing, and the functions of one's determination, wisdom and self-concern, or mind, intelligence and false ego, as also the primary cause of matter, and the gunas, are thus to be understood as transformations of my nature. This living entity, one and unmanifest, that is concerned with the threefold nature of the gunas, constitutes the source of the lotus of creation. He who is eternal, in the course of time divided there with his potencies in many divisions, just like seeds do that fell on fertile soil. The complete of this universe, expanding long and wide like cloth expanding along the threads of its warp and woof, is situated in him on his thread. Since time immemorial there is this tree of material existence, samsara, that, blossoming and producing fruits, is naturally inclined to fruitive action. Of this tree extending in the sun there are two seeds, sin and piety, hundreds of roots, the living entities, 3 lower trunks, the modes, 5 upper trunks, the elements, 5 saps produced, sound, form, touch, taste and aroma, 11 branches, the mind and the 10 indriyas, 2 birds having a nest, jiva and atma, 3 types of bark, air, bile and mucus, and 2 fruits, happiness and distress. Those who fervently desiring live a household life enjoy one fruit of the tree, that of sin, whereas the other fruit, of piety, is enjoyed by the swan-like sages who live in the forest. He who with the help of the worshipable ones knows the oneness of him who by dint of his mire appears in many forms, knows the actual meaning of the Vedas. The sober soul who thus with unalloyed devotion honors the spiritual master and with the axe of knowledge cuts with the subtle body of attachment entertained by the individual soul, attains with the greatest care living spiritually the Supreme Soul and then abandons the means by which he attained. Chapter 13, the Hamsa Avatara answers the questions of the sons of Brahma. The Supreme Lord said, the goodness, passion and ignorance we know from the gunas are matters of the mind and not of the soul. With goodness the other two can be counteracted, while goodness itself is controlled by character and good sense. The goodness of someone leads to and strengthens the Dharma that is characterized by devotional service unto me. That what belongs to the mode of goodness will result in Bhagavata Dharma when one seriously cultivates its inner strength. When goodness increases and dominates, Dharma puts an end to passion and ignorance. When they are superseded, the godlessness that is the root of the two is quickly vanquished. The doctrine followed, the way one deals with water, the people one associates with, one's surroundings and the way one behaves with time, one's occupational activities, one's birth or social background, as also the type of meditation, mantras and purificatory rites one respects are the 10 factors determining the prominence of a particular mode. That what of these matters belongs to the mode of goodness is appreciated by the classical sages, that what belongs to the mode of ignorance they criticize, and that what belongs to the mode of passion they are neutral about. As long as there is no self-realization, self-remembrance, making amends for the influence of the modes, a person should cultivate the things belonging to the mode of goodness so that the character develops from which the religiousness rises that leads to spiritual insight. Just as fire, that in a forest of bamboos was generated by friction of the stalks, pacifies after having burned, also the activity of the material body and the mind will pacify that was generated by the interaction of the natural modes. The Supreme Lord said, it is because a fool has another intelligence in his eye-awareness. Not paying attention to his Dharma, a terrible passion arises in his heart that leads his mind astray. Bound to that passion, the mind thus convinced imagines all kinds of things. Focused on the qualities of nature, he is thus beset with desires that make his life unbearable. With the senses not under control, someone, bewildered by the force of passion and under the sway of desires, engages in fruitive activities, despite being well aware of the resulting unhappiness. Even though the intelligence of a learned person gets bewildered by passion and ignorance, no attachment arises in him because he, well aware of the contamination, carefully puts his mind back on the right track. When one has conquered the breathing process and has mastered the sitting postures, one should attentively, step by step, without slackening, gather one's mind by concentrating on me at appointed times. The yoga system as instructed by my pupils under the lead of Sanaka boils down to the following: turn the mind away from everything and directly find absorption in me the way it should with mantras. Sanaka and the others said to him, the mind is directed at the gunas, the qualities of nature, and the gunas impose themselves on the mind. O Master, what is for someone who desires liberation, for someone who wishes to cross over this material ocean, the process of breaking away from that mutual effect? Thus, being questioned by the sages interested in the ultimate truth, I spoke to them. Please Yudhava, hear now what I said to them that moment. O Brahmins, if you with that question mean to say that, relating to the one true essence, there would be no difference between our individual souls, how then would you be able to pose a question like this, O sages, or how could I as a speaker then be of any authority or constitute refuge? Also, if you would refer to the 5 elements our bodies are equally composed of, your question about who I am would in fact be a meaningless gesture of words. That what by the mind, speech, sight and the other senses is grasped, is what I all am. There is really nothing that exists outside of me, that is what you have to understand clearly. The mind is directed at the gunas and the gunas impose themselves upon the mind, dear men, but to the living entity of which I am the soul, both the mind and the gunas are outer appearances. With the mind directed at the natural qualities and the qualities that, imposing themselves by stimulating the senses, constantly put the mind at work, the one who is of realization with my transcendental form, through meditation must give up both the mind and the operation of the gunas. Wakefulness, dreaming and deep sleep are the transformations of the mind due to the modes of nature. The individual soul is, with characteristics different from them, known to be their witness. The materially motivated intelligence constitutes the bondage that keeps the soul occupied with the modes of nature, but when one is situated in me, in the fourth state of consciousness, Turiya, one at that moment can give up both the mind and the sense objects. The bondage of the soul is a result of identifying oneself with the body constitutes the opposite purpose. A soul of knowledge who detached in samsara is situated in the fourth state, gives up the anxiety about those ego matters. As long as a person is convinced of many different purposes and does not desist from that engagement by means of meditation, he, even though awake, will be sleeping with his eyes open, just as unaware as someone who sees something in a dream. The states of existence apart from the Supreme Soul are inessential because of the separation created by them. To the seer who is filled with motives and objectives, they are just as deluding as what one experiences in a dream. In the waking state he enjoys the qualities of the external matters at the moment. In his dreams he undergoes with all his senses a similar experience in the mind. In deep sleep he withdraws himself completely. But being one in his remembrance in Turiya he, as a witness of the functioning of the three successive states of consciousness, becomes lord and master over his senses. After considering the three states of consciousness that originate from the modes of my nature, my deluding potency, then be resolute about the purpose of realizing me as the fourth state and cut in your heart with the cause of all doubts by means of the sword of discrimination sharpened by the logic and instructions concerning the truth. Regard this delusional state of mind, with images popping up today and gone tomorrow, as the most restless fear of a firebrand. The one spiritual soul deceptively appears in many divisions as an illusion, a threefold dream of variations operated by the Guna creation. When you turn your eye away from that creation and become silent with your desires ended, you, in meditation, must arrive at the realization of your actual happiness. And in case you happen to be full of thoughts about this earth, you have to understand that that is insubstantial. That what one gives up one will remember till the end of one's life and will not confuse one again. Just as someone blurred by liquor is indifferent about the clothes he put on, it makes no difference to the one of perfection whether his perishable body sits or stands, or whether he by providence leaves this earth or obtains a new body. For he reached his original position of service, his Svarupa. The body will, as long as its karma, its chain of fruitive actions, lasts, continue with the breathing it took up as ordained by fate. But having awakened to his original position, someone highly situated in the absorption of yoga will no longer cultivate any such ego-driven dreaming and appear as such. O learned souls, understand that with this explanation about the confidential, analytical knowledge of yoga, the science of uniting one's consciousness, I have come to you as Yajna Vishnu, the Lord of Sacrifice, with the desire to describe the Dharma of persons like you. O best of the twice-born souls, I am the supreme way of yoga, of analysis, of the truth and the sacred law, as also the ultimate path of all beauty, fame and self-control. All the excellence such as being transcendentally situated, being free from expectations, being the well-wisher, the dearest one, the true self, the one equal, the detachment and so on, belongs, for being free from the natural modes, to my honor. Chapter 14, The Devotional Coherence of the Methods and the Meditation on Vishnu. With inevitably a beginning and an end to the meager ends gained with one's karma, there is the prospect of misery as a consequence. Situated in ignorance, one is doomed to a miserable existence full of complaints. Someone who has fixed his consciousness on me, O man of learning, and in every respect is free from material desires, knows the happiness of my spiritual self. How can such a happiness ever be attained by those who are attached to worldly affairs? He who does not desire, who is of peace and controls his senses, whose consciousness is equal whatever the circumstances, and who has a mind that is completely satisfied with me, is filled with happiness wherever he goes. A soul fixed in me wants me and nothing else. He does not desire the position of Brahma, nor the position of Indra. He neither wants an empire on earth nor a sovereign position in the lower worlds. He does not desire the perfections of yoga or a second birth. The sage who without personal desire is of peace, who is not inimical to anyone and of an equal vision, I always follow closely so that there is purification by the dust of the lotus feet. The great souls who not eager for sense gratification are of a mind that is constantly attached to me, who are of inner peace, who care for all individual souls and whose consciousness is not ruled by lusts, experience my happiness that can only be known by complete independence. Despite being harassed by sensual desires, a devotee of mine who did not conquer his strong senses by dint of his devotion will not be defeated thereby. Just as firewood because of the blazing flames of a fire turns into ashes, devotion with me as the object burns the sins completely, O Yudhava. The yoga system, analytical philosophy, pious activities, Vedic study, austerity and renunciation, O Yudhava, do not keep me as satisfied as a well-developed devotional service unto me. One obtains me by single-minded devotion with faith in the Supreme Soul, the object of love of the devotees. Devotional service directed at me will even purify someone who has eaten dogs. Neither Dharma accompanied by truthfulness and mercy, nor knowledge linked to austerity will purify one's consciousness fully when bereft of devotional service unto me. How can without bhakti one's hair stand on end, without loving service the heart melt, without devotion the tears flow, the bliss be and one's heart be purified? The universe is purified by the one whose voice chokes up, whose heart melts, who cries again and again, sometimes laughs, is ashamed, loudly sings and dances in the connectedness of my bhakti. Just like gold being molten in fire gives up impurities and returns to its original state, also the contamination of karma is removed from the spirit soul when one worships me united in my loving service. Even as the power to see restores once is the eyes treated with ointment, the spirit soul again sees the one subtle essence once being cleansed by hearing and chanting my pious narrations. Just as the intelligence of someone meditating the objects of the senses is entangled in the sense experience, one's thought becomes dissolved in me when one keeps thinking of me. One's material considerations are therefore like the figments of a dream. Having awakened being absorbed in me, one forsakes them. The mind is purified when one is completely absorbed in my love. Giving up being intimate with women and keeping far from those attached to uniting sexually, one should thus, free from being physically identified, composed, sit at ease in seclusion and with great care concentrate on me. No other attachment brings a man as much suffering and bondage as the attachment to women and the association with those who are attached to women. Sri Yudhava said, O lotus-eyed one, how should one meditate on you when one desires liberation? In what way and on what form? Please, can you speak to me about meditation? The Supreme Lord said, sitting straight and comfortably on a seat at the level of the floor, one should place one's hands in one's lap and focus one's eyes on the tip of one's nose. Then one should clear the path of one's prana, one's vital air, step by step exercising inhaling, retaining and exhaling and the other way around, while controlling one's senses. With the help of one's life breath one should, like through the fiber of a lotus stalk, guide upwards the sound dome in the heart to vibrate it continuously like a ringing bell so as to reunite the sounds of recitation in the nose. The life breath must thus joined with the pranava be practiced 10 times, at sunrise, noon and sunset. After 1 month, one will then be in control of one's vital air. With one's eyes half closed one should, alert and with one's face lifted, concentrate on the lotus within the heart that is directed upwards. By turning the mind away from the senses and their sense objects, one thus with intelligence should lead the charioteer of one's thinking, the soul, sober and grave, with love and the direction of my completeness. With one's consciousness thus fully absorbed, the individual soul sees me in the self and all selves in me, the same way the rays of the sun are united in the sun. The deluded state of considering oneself the owner, the knower and the doer, will altogether soon find its dissolution in the mind of the yogi who most concentrated practices the meditation as mentioned. Chapter 22, Prakriti and Purusha, Nature and the Enjoyer. A person is stuck to eternal ignorance and cannot all by himself figure out what the process of self-realization entails. That knowledge is derived from someone else familiar with the absolute truth. In this knowledge concerning the good quality of material nature, there is not the slightest difference between the Purusha, the Supreme Being, the Soul, the actual person, and Ishvara the Lord. To suppose that it would be otherwise is a useless figment. The modes of goodness, passion and ignorance as the causes of, respectively, maintenance, creation and destruction, constitute material nature, Prakriti, but do not control the soul. Sri Udhava said, because both nature and the enjoyer, Prakriti and Purusha, despite being constitutionally different, cover one another, O Krishna, there seems to be no difference between the two. One sees the soul within nature and nature within the soul. Please, O lotus-eyed one, all-knowing and very expert in reasoning, cut down with your words the great doubt in my heart. The living beings receive from you the knowledge that by the potency of your outer illusion is stolen away again. Only you understand the real nature of your illusory power and no one else. The Supreme Lord said, Prakriti and Purusha, nature and the enjoyer, are completely different, O best of all persons. This creation, Prakriti, is subjected to transformation because of the interaction of the gunas. My dear, the deluding energy consisting of the three modes establishes by those modes a diversity of combinations and mentalities. This changeable nature based upon the gunas is of three kinds. One is called Adhyatma, the next Adhidaiva and another Adhibhuta. In this world one's sight, Adhyatma, that what one sees, Adhibhuta, and the light upon it, Adhidaiva, create each other's perfection with the sun independently in the sky. So too the Supersoul, the original cause separate from these three aspects, by its own conscious experience acts as the perfection of all that was achieved. Next to the eyes the same trinity applies to the sense of touch and what one feels with it, to the ear and what one hears, to the tongue and its occupation, to the nose with what is smelled and to one's consciousness together with its attributes. The agitation of the modes takes place on the basis of the primal ether and leads to changes. The principle of the intellect therefore gives rise to a false awareness that is the cause of three different types of bewilderment, emotion, ignorance, and sensual pleasure. Lacking the full knowledge of the Supersoul, one says things like this is real and that is not real with the focus of discussion on material dualities. Although useless, such speculations will not cease for as long as persons have turned their attention away from me, their true abode. Sri Udhava said, how do those souls whose minds are diverted from you by the fruitive activities they perform, O Master, accept and give up higher and lower material bodies? Please Govinda explain to me what by those who are not so spiritual is not understood because they, predominantly knowing this world, were cheated. The Supreme Lord said, the mind of people that is shaped by their fruitive labor, is bound to the five senses. Traveling from one world to the next, the soul, that has a separate existence, follows that mind. The mind that depending its karma always contemplates, rises because of what is seen or heard about through the senses, but inert, when dying away from the sense objects, the remembrance of that life is thereupon lost. This total forgetfulness of the living entity in which it does not remember a self that for this or that reason was absorbed in the objects of the senses, is what one calls death. O man of charity, what one calls birth is when a person completely identifies himself with the body he assumed, just like what one does in a dream or when one has a fantasy. And just as one in a dream or fantasy has no remembrance of a previous dream or fantasy, one also does not think of having had a previous existence. Because of the creation of this sense refuge, this body, a threefold notion of being of a high, middle or low-class birth appears concerning the form assumed. This leads the person to believe in an outer duality also found inside, like giving birth to bad offspring. My best one, created bodies constantly find and lose their existence as a consequence of time, the imperceptible, subtle energy of which one does not notice. Just like the flame of a candle, the stream of a river and the fruits of a tree, the lifespan, the circumstances and such of all created beings are determined by it. One has it wrong when one says this light is the same as this lamp and this flow of water is the same as this river. The same way it is wrong to say that this human body is the same as this person. It is a way of reasoning by which men are wasting their lives. Actually, this person does not take birth from the seed of his own activities, nor does he die. He is immortal and was only joined with this body because of illusion, just like fire and firewood. Impregnation, gestation, birth, infancy, childhood, youth, middle age, old age and death are the 9 stages of the body. These superior or inferior physical conditions that one owes to one's own motives of karmic rebirth, a soul accepts as his own because of being bound to the modes, but sometimes he, by the grace of the Lord with due effort in yoga, manages to distance himself from them. From the birth of one's offspring and death of one's forefathers one may conclude to the truth of one's own life. He who properly understands the characteristics of this duality, and thus knows he is the continuing soul, is no longer subject to this generation and destruction of things. Someone knowing about the seed and maturity of a tree, is the witness distinct from the birth and death of that tree. In the same way one is the witness separate from the birth and death of the physical body. An unintelligent person who fails to distinguish between soul and matter and in touch with matter takes the external world for the real thing, lands completely bewildered in the cycle of birth and death. Wandering around because of his karma he, when he follows the mode of goodness, will go to the sages and the gods. Following the lead of passion, he will move among the common people or fall into the demoniac grip of darkness, and by the mode of ignorance he will find himself among the ghosts and spirits or reach the animal kingdom. Observing dancing and singing persons one tends to imitate them. The same way one is, despite as a silent witness not being engaged, inclined towards a material intelligence when one is faced with the qualities of matter. Just as trees seem to move seen in water that moves and the world seems to spin when one's eyes are spinning around, one's mental impressions of experienced sense objects are neither real. Just like the things one sees in a dream are but figments of one's imagination, also the soul's image of a life of birth and death is but a phantom. For someone meditating the objects of the senses, material life will not stop despite being an illusory affair, just like the occurrence of unpleasant things in a dream may repeat itself. Therefore Yudhava, do not delight in the sense objects that play games with the senses. Just see how one, based upon the illusion of the material duality risen within the self, fails to realize the soul. Chapter 29, Bhakti Yoga, the most auspicious way to conquer death. With a pure heart one should see me, the Supreme Soul free as the sky, as being present within and without oneself and all living beings. O brightest spirit, when one with my love thus is of respect for all living beings, one with such an approach has taken shelter of the highest possible knowledge, the absolute unity of spirit. This way regarding the Brahmin and the outcast, the thief and the man faithful to the Brahminical culture, the sun and the spark, the gentle one and the cruel one equally, one is considered a wise person. Of the person who constantly meditates upon my presence in all men, quickly the rivalry, envy, disdain and false ego will disappear. With the functions of what one says, thinks and does, one this way will have to be of worship as long as one has not developed the vision of me being present in all living beings. For the one who by knowledge and realization sees the Supreme Soul everywhere, everything is based upon the absolute truth. Thus, free from doubt he should desist from material striving. I consider this, with the functions of one's mind, words and actions seeing me within all living beings, the most appropriate of all processes. My dear, because this by me perfectly established method is free from the modes and as no ulterior motives there is, when one thus tries to be of service unto me, Yudhava, not even the slightest loss. O best among the pious souls, when one is capable of performing one's duty free from ulterior motives for the sake of me, the One Supreme, the emotions of that endeavor like fear and such, will be futile. This in one's life by means of the false and mortal achieving of me, the One Immortal, constitutes the cleverness of the clever and the intelligence of the intelligent. For the inquisitive one fully understanding this, there is nothing further to know. Once one has drunk the nectar of this palatable beverage, nothing will remain. When a mortal surrenders himself to me and forsakes all his fruitive labor in his desire of service, he at that time attains freedom from birth and death and qualifies for sharing in my nature. The Supreme Lord said, "Please Udhava, accept my advice to head for my hermitage called Bhadraka. At the riverbanks there be purified by the touching of and bathing in the water emanating from my feet. Be, with your eyes fixed upon the Alakananda, a tributary of the Ganges, cleansed of all impurities. Dress yourself in bark, my dear, eat from the forest and be happy, freed from desire. Exercise with your intelligence, spiritual knowledge and wisdom, forbearance with all dualities, keep saintly to your principles, restrict your senses and live in peace and absorption. Believe in and meditate upon that what you from me have learned to discriminate. When you with your words and mind absorbed in me thus devote yourself to my Dharma, you will, with that discipline reaching beyond the three destinations, thereupon reach me." Anyone who with honest belief is full of attention for this ocean of ecstasy, this nectarian sea of spiritual knowledge, of Bhakti Yoga, that by Krishna, he whose feet are served by the masters of yoga, was collected for his devotee, will liberate himself and therewith the entire world.